At the Academy's graduation party, the second prince of the Meerhauser kingdom, Alois, angrily and publicly annuls his engagement to Charlotte, the Duke of Edelstein's daughter. He accuses her of committing a grave crime by using her status as a shield to oppress and endanger a lower-ranking lady. The gathered students watch in shock, realizing this ruins what was supposed to be a bright departure into adulthood as they reminisced about their school days. The festive mood of the day instantly shatters, destroying what was supposed to be a celebration. However, what actually begins is a tense standoff as Charlotte stares blankly at the prince and his new companion. Seeing the two act like true, persecuted lovers makes the entire situation look like an absurd farce to onlookers. Letting out a resigned sigh, Charlotte realizes she has been cast as the wicked woman standing in their way. Pointing an accusatory finger, the prince glares at her furiously. He angrily declares that she has committed numerous crimes by repeatedly harassing Lady Krista of the Baron Belt's family. Whispers erupt from the crowd, detailing malicious acts like the theft of personal belongings, sending threatening letters, and destroying textbooks. The rumors escalate as onlookers recall hearing that she almost pushed Krista down the stairs the other day. Charlotte stands isolated and silent as the surrounding nobles judge her. The person leading this ruthless accusation is Prince Alois, a man known for being highly sociable, well-liked, and academically unmatched. Aside from his inappropriate closeness to Lady Krista, he had been the perfect prince during his engagement to Charlotte. Closing her eyes, Charlotte lets out another weary sigh as the accusations rain down. Staring coldly ahead, she internally acknowledges that this exact scenario is unfolding exactly as expected, yet again. This devastating moment is the exact reason why she felt she was dying inside. Bound by an inescapable curse, Charlotte is actually repeating the exact same life for the fifth time. In every single loop, her engagement is annulled in an unusual manner and she is falsely accused of crimes she never committed. During her first life she firmly asserted her innocence, but could not overturn the accusations as pieces of false evidence kept appearing. In her second life, she broke down and pleaded her innocence with desperate tears streaming from her eyes. Despite her crying, everyone ultimately believed the damning evidence presented by Prince Alois. During her third life, she tactically requested to return to the Duke's mansion to gather allies and prove her innocence. Her pleas were completely ignored, with her captors claiming she would surely try to escape justice. Taking drastic measures in her fourth life, she made a desperate attempt to physically escape the venue and head to the mansion, but failed. Following her failure, she was ruthlessly thrown into the dark depths of the underground dungeon. Locked away in isolation, there was never any further investigation or any permitted visits with her family. Her captors provided only the bare minimum to survive, giving her water and bread so hard it could break her teeth. Suffering in the dark, she realized it would have been much better if she had just been thrown into the slums where she could at least live freely. And then, several agonizing months later, a sudden spray of dark blood violently spatters across the stone floor. Collapsing in agony as blood pours from her mouth, she realizes they added poison to her meager meals. Dying for the fourth time, she fiercely vows that she absolutely does not want to go through this torment ever again. Charlotte recalls the agony of her previous deaths, remembering the crushing despair of suffering in prison only to die in pain. Haunted by these memories, she questions why she is cursed to continually return to the exact moment her engagement is broken off. She realizes that no matter what she does, she is destined to be falsely accused and imprisoned again in this recurring nightmare. With a heavy heart, she concludes she is merely a stage prop designed to establish the true love between Prince Alois and Lady Krista. The prince stares at her with a cold, expectant gaze, waiting for her reaction to his harsh accusations. Charlotte confronts the prince, stating that regardless of her words, he has already decided to place all the blame on her. Overwhelmed by the futility of her situation and the weight of 4 past lives, she declares that she has finally had enough and is utterly exhausted. The crowd of nobles gasps in surprise, their fans fluttering as they witness the usually composed Charlotte reach her breaking point. Prince Alois and Lady Krista look on with expressions of shock and confusion at Charlotte's unexpected defiance. Charlotte stands tall, her eyes closed as she prepares to abandon the role of the perfect noblewoman she played for so long. Onlookers whisper in confusion, struggling to reconcile this broken woman with the perfect model of a noblewoman they once knew. Charlotte reflects on how hard she worked to never bring shame to her family or the title of crown princess. She recalls always staying one step behind the prince, supporting him to the best of her abilities throughout their engagement. Looking up at the ornate ceiling of the ballroom, she realizes with bitter clarity that all of her past efforts were for nothing. Resigned to her fate, she acknowledges that in the end, she is going to die regardless of her choices. She tells the prince that defending herself is meaningless, causing him to react with indignant shock. Charlotte flatly states that she has no desire to waste further effort on a life that holds no meaning for her. The prince interprets her lack of defense as an admission of guilt, pressing her to confess to the fabricated crimes. Letting out a long sigh, she tells him to simply do as he pleases rather than continuing this roundabout interrogation. In a shocking move, she looks the prince in the eye and asks him to just hurry up and kill her already. The audience is horrified by her request, whispering that it is clearly abnormal for the dignified Charlotte to beg for death. Rumors begin to circulate among the nobles, questioning if the daughter of the great ducal house of Edelstein has been mistreated for a long time. People start to suspect that only those with immense power could have driven a woman of her status to such a desperate state. Prince Alois recoils, his face paling as the tide of public opinion begins to turn against him. The prince stammers as he realizes the gravity of Charlotte's unexpected plea for execution. Gossiping nobles point out that Charlotte was never obsessed with the prince, and that it was actually Alois who frequently visited Krista. Panicking, the prince shouts at the crowd not to be deceived by Charlotte's performance. He desperately claims that Charlotte is a calculating person who is only trying to gain sympathy to lessen her eventual punishment. The crowd remains skeptical, finding it hard to believe that the prince would disgrace Lady Charlotte so publicly without cause. A voice from the crowd challenges the prince, asking if he has solid evidence to support his extreme accusations. A sinister smirk grows on the prince's face as he confidently confirms that he has exactly what he needs to destroy her. Charlotte internally notes that he must have already arranged for her to take the blame, even as he mockingly offers to bring the false evidence forward. Prince Alois reacts in shock while Charlotte dismisses the concern of those watching the confrontation. Charlotte complains that her back hurts, noting the luxurious carpet feels as hard as the prison beds of her past. Reaching her limit with the drama, she simply tells the guards to take her away. The knight is stunned when Charlotte correctly identifies that she is meant for the rat-infested underground cell number 6. She muses that the specific reasons for her arrest no longer matter since the result is always the same. Charlotte expresses her loathing for cell number 6, recalling the leaks and rats from her previous life loops. To the horror of the room, she bluntly asks to be beheaded immediately instead of suffering in the dungeon. The knight is left speechless, sweating profusely at the noblewoman's casual request for her own execution. Onlookers begin to whisper, noting that Charlotte describes the suffering of the dungeons in an oddly specific manner. The crowd realizes she doesn't appear to be lying, especially since the knight standing beside her cannot deny her claims. Suspicions rise among the nobles that Charlotte may have been secretly imprisoned in those royal dungeons before. Breaking her silence, Lady Krista desperately insists that the harassment she suffered was a reality. Krista claims that she was pushed down the stairs at the academy immediately after school. She describes turning around in shock as she fell down the staircase. Krista points out that the woman she saw running away had long black hair, an academy trait unique to Charlotte. Sobbing for the crowd, Krista claims there were many other malicious incidents that left her living in constant fear. A heavy, judgmental silence falls over the hall as the onlookers process Krista's tearful testimony. Krista turns toward Charlotte, stating that she doesn't actually wish for her rival to die. Playing the part of a merciful saint, Krista offers to forgive all of Charlotte's crimes if she simply apologizes. The scene frames Krista as a divine figure offering salvation to a wicked woman in front of the assembly. Charlotte acknowledges that in her past lives she might have rejoiced at such mercy and apologized to save herself. She deems forgiveness unnecessary and views the alleged harassment as too lukewarm to change her inevitable fate. Charlotte repeats the word lukewarm aloud, leaving the confused Krista stammering for a response. She explains that for a powerful ducal family, such trivial accusations are far from her house's actual capability for destruction. Krista recoils in shock while Prince Alois shouts in a panic over Charlotte's cold logic. The prince loses his temper, calling Charlotte a ruthless woman for refusing Krista's offer of forgiveness. Charlotte counters that she hasn't done a single thing to harm Krista's family, questioning the prince's definition of ruthless. A noble in the audience suddenly shouts for a reinvestigation, fearing that Charlotte is being falsely accused. Others warn Prince Alois that making false accusations against a high-ranking noble will irreparably damage his royal honor. The crowd begins to question the prince's assumptions, suggesting they check ink and alibis to find the real culprit. Onlookers plead with Prince Alois to find the true criminal instead of simply targeting Lady Charlotte. Amidst the growing chaos, the exhausted Charlotte wonders if the identity of the actual culprit even matters to her anymore. Charlotte muses that if they imprison her as planned, the prince and Krista will finally overcome all obstacles to their union. Watching the spectacle unfold, she remains cold and detached, urging the conspirators to end the farce quickly. She reflects on how this unexpected turn of events makes hope seem utterly useless in her current predicament. Looking completely broken, Charlotte admits she is tired of believing in the possibility of salvation. Her only remaining desire is to conclude the painful ceremony as fast as possible to escape the public gaze. In a moment of deep despair, she morbidly wonders which window she should leap from to finally end her suffering. A sudden, strange shift in the atmosphere ripples through the ballroom. Faces in the crowd twist in shock as an unexpected presence interrupts the judgment. A sharp, piercing gaze fixes on the center of the room as something remarkable begins to happen. The air crackles with magical energy, signaling the arrival of a powerful new player. A star-shaped pendant glimmers brightly, catching everyone's eye as it materializes in the light. Fearful whispers spread through the hall as onlookers recognize the silhouette of the legendary Demon King. A tall, imposing man with long white hair steps forward, his presence immediately commanding the entire room. Smiling confidently, the man acknowledges that his alias has become quite famous before preparing an official introduction. He reveals his true identity as Vim Gisbert, the sorcerer who famously destroyed the matriarchal order. Vim looks directly at Charlotte with a slight, enigmatic smile and politely greets the assembly. Whispers of lore describe Vim as the strongest genius on the continent, a man from an ordinary background who uses eternal magical power. He recalls a flashback where the king of his homeland tried to coerce him into a master-servant contract by threatening his birthplace. In a display of terrifying power, the royal castle was reduced to barren land only a single day after the threat. While no one was killed in the destruction, the king was immediately deposed for his foolishness. Currently, the neighboring Cromhides kingdom governs the land through a political contract signed with the powerful sorcerer. Vim's boots click against the marble floor as he approaches the center of the conflict. Prince Alois stammers in confusion, demanding to know why such a powerful figure has appeared at the academy. Vim calmly explains that Charlotte's father invited him to serve as a lecturer at the prestigious institution. He admits he only accepted the offer because he thought it might be interesting to observe the students. Having secretly observed the party without the prince's knowledge, he expresses his satisfaction with what he has witnessed. The crowd continues to gossip in the shadows, unnerved by the sorcerer's sudden intervention. Vim takes a deliberate step toward Charlotte, his focus narrowing on the accused woman. To Charlotte's surprise, Vim asks for her permission to get personally involved in the matter of her trial. He stares at her with a knowing, serene expression that seems to see through her resignation. Vim asks what she truly intends to do now that her path has been blocked by these accusations. He proposes subjecting her to a magical verification, and Charlotte tells him to do as he wishes without hesitation. Vim finds her total lack of shame or fear incredibly amusing, his smile widening at her boldness. A high-ranking official, revealed to be the king, stumbles back in absolute shock at Vim's proposal. Prince Alois is horrified to see his father present, especially as Vim asks the king to act as a witness to the trial. Vim reveals that he and the king were watching from the shadows all along and will now determine the absolute truth. The king, visibly sweating under Vim's pressure, reluctantly agrees to let the magical investigation proceed. Alois trembles at the king's presence while the monarch expresses his own desire to uncover the truth. Charlotte realizes her engagement was always a political game and wonders if the king ignored her suffering in past loops. Staring into Vim's eyes, she understands her life would have been lost if he hadn't decided to intervene. Vim notices the change in her expression and asks if she is ready to begin the verification. With newfound resolve, Charlotte confirms that she is prepared for him to start at any time. Raising his hand, Vim prepares to summon a demonic entity to serve as the final judge of truth. He chants a command for the creature to come forth from the depths of the void. The sorcerer calls out the name of the demon, Alphas, as magical circles form on the ground. A massive, wolf-like demon materializes and asks Vim what work he has for it to complete this day. Vim instructs the demon Alphas to judge the truth, granting it permission to curse any liars and feed upon their mounting suffering. Alphas prepares to fulfill its role, its massive lupine form and glowing eyes looming over the terrified assembly. Addressing the gathered crowd, Vim asks whose truth they should verify first as the ballroom's atmosphere grows increasingly heavy. He points directly at Charlotte, identifying her as the beautiful black-haired young lady who will be the first subject of the demonic trial. Vim officially opens the proceedings by calling Lady Charlotte forward to stand before the demon's absolute judgment. He asks her directly whether she truly caused any harm to Baroness Krista, the girl at the center of the prince's public accusations. Staring ahead with calm resolve, Charlotte firmly declares that she was never involved in the alleged crimes in any way. Vim confirms the demon has judged her words to be the absolute truth, proving to the students that the young lady is not lying. With her innocence established on the first count, Vim notes he has one more vital question to ask the accused noblewoman. He asks her if she remembers being assaulted by Prince Alois, a shocking inquiry that sends a ripple of disbelief through the hall. Prince Alois looks on with a sweat-streaked face, clearly horrified by the direction the magical interrogation is taking. Charlotte sadly confirms the truth of the assault, noting that her words never seem to reach His Highness despite her past efforts. The demon validates her testimony a second time as the surrounding nobles begin to whisper about the prince's true character. Vim tells Alphas to remain calm since there is still another target left to judge before the creature can fully feed. Turning to the monarch, Vim declares to His Majesty that it is now officially proven that Lady Charlotte is innocent. The king questions if this means the reports and evidence previously provided by Prince Alois were completely fabricated from the start. Vim turns his piercing attention toward Krista, asking the young lady if it is actually true that she was ever in any real danger. Krista desperately insists she told the truth and is not lying, but the demon's judgmental presence begins to loom over her. Vim concludes that if Charlotte is innocent, then the real culprit behind the harassment must be someone else entirely. He asks if Prince Alois was the person who personally conducted the entire investigation and gathered the evidence against Charlotte. Looking down with a cold and sharp gaze, Vim receives confirmation that the prince was indeed the lead investigator. It is revealed that the prince only targeted Charlotte because Krista came to him pleading for protection and help. Vim informs the sweating prince that he is not done questioning him yet, as the demon continues to sense the underlying truth. He asks the prince if his investigation was truly conducted from an impartial standpoint as befits a member of the royal family. Although the prince claims he was fair, Vim flatly declares his statement to be a blatant and pathetic lie. Magical chains erupt from the ballroom floor, binding the prince tightly as the demon's curse takes a physical form. The prince is violently pulled down to the ground, his body constricted by the weight of his own mounting falsehoods. Screaming in terror, the prince demands to know what is happening as the demon begins to savor his intense suffering. Vim asks if the prince planned from the very beginning to conduct an investigation specifically designed to make Charlotte look guilty. The prince's desperate denial is immediately flagged as another lie, causing the curse to tighten its painful grip even further. As the prince groans that his body is going numb, Alphas gleefully notes how tasty the man's suffering has become. Pushed to his absolute limit, the prince screams that he does not know who the real culprit is while the assembly watches his public downfall. Groaning in agony, the prince struggles against the crushing weight of the demonic curse. The king frantically interrupts the interrogation, declaring that the prince's previous statement was an undeniable lie. Sweating profusely, the king pleads with Lord Vim to halt the public trial and move the matter to the royal palace for now. Smiling knowingly, Vim raises a single finger and agrees to the request with the condition of asking one last thing. Gesturing toward the suffering royal, Vim calmly asks if the true culprit behind the harassment is actually Prince Alois himself. Tightly bound by dark magical chains, the prince refuses to speak further and desperately begs to end the interrogation already. A sinister smile spreads across Vim's face as he coldly explains that refusing to answer a demon guarantees a severe penalty. Vim notes that the prince has already told 3 lies, warning him that every refusal will compound his agonizing curse. He softly advises the royal to be careful, revealing that accumulating a 4th curse makes the demonic punishment completely irreversible. Leaning over the gasping prince, Vim demands to know if His Highness will finally speak the truth or seal his fate with another lie. The terrified prince stares up from the floor as the sorcerer asks if he will choose to remain stubbornly silent. Trapped perfectly within the demon's magical sight, the prince is ruthlessly commanded to make his final choice. Sweat pours down the prince's panicked face as he fully realizes the inescapable and deadly corner he has been backed into. Trembling violently within his dark bindings, the prince mutters in absolute disbelief that this public humiliation cannot be happening. Lady Krista gasps in horror while the king covers his face in profound shame at the royal family's unfolding disaster. Charlotte stands entirely composed and silent, coldly watching her former fiancé writhe in the misery he tried to inflict upon her. Her dark eyes reflect absolutely no sympathy, showing only the wary detachment of a woman who has endured this cycle far too many times. Gritting his teeth against the searing pain, Prince Alois furiously thinks that his grand plan was never supposed to end like this. Finally breaking under the immense demonic pressure, the prince collapses forward and groans out a pathetic confession. The towering demon officially confirms the confession as the absolute truth, fully satisfying Vim's relentless interrogation. Vim bursts into theatrical laughter, cheerfully summarizing that His Highness staged the entire harassment plot just to discard an inconvenient fiancé. Flashing a wicked grin, Vim mocks the prince as a complete psychopath who executed his cruel scheme with typical royal arrogance. The king calls out to the sorcerer, his voice trembling with fearful submission as he attempts to salvage the broken situation. Pleading for mercy, the king begs Vim to stand down and promises that Prince Alois will be properly punished by the crown. Closing his eyes with a highly satisfied smirk, Vim finally agrees to pull back his demonic forces for the time being. However, his tone turns deadly serious as he reminds the king that this cruel farce drove a young woman to actively wish for her own death. Glaring with intimidating authority, Vim openly warns the king to think very carefully about the strict nature of the prince's upcoming punishment. Sweating under the intense magical pressure, the king hastily promises to deliver true justice to appease the overwhelming sorcerer. With a crisp, echoing snap of his fingers, Vim immediately initiates the release of his binding dark magic. The heavy magical chains binding the prince instantly shatter into vanishing fragments, finally freeing the bruised royal. Slumping back against the floor in sheer relief, the gasping prince cries out that he is finally saved from the agonizing torture. Unbothered by the prince's pathetic relief, Vim coldly suggests sending him straight to the palace so his official punishment can proceed immediately. The bewildered royal guards watch in awe as a massive surge of magic abruptly envelopes the room. A blinding pillar of light shatters through the grand hall's ceiling, signaling a powerful teleportation spell. Finding herself completely isolated in a sudden white void, Charlotte stands frozen in confusion. Clutching her chest, she mutters to herself while trying to process the overwhelming turn of events. Staring blankly ahead, she internally questions if she has truly been saved this time around. Glancing up at a familiar chandelier, the exhausted noblewoman wonders if she will actually be able to survive this new loop. A sudden gust of magical wind violently whips her long black hair through the air. Materializing from the light, Lord Vim effortlessly catches Charlotte in a protective princess carry. Glaring up at the sorcerer, Charlotte immediately demands to know the meaning behind his bold actions. Vim smoothly counters that she was the one who told him to do as he pleased, boldly admitting he was thinking of making her his. Leaning in closer, the sorcerer playfully asks if he can take her with him because he truly wants to possess her. Flustered by his shameless teasing, Charlotte furiously scolds him and firmly denies granting him that kind of permission. Unfazed by her rejection, Vim smiles softly and confesses that she is the first woman he has found so beautifully interesting. Regaining her cold composure, Charlotte firmly states that courting her requires her father's impossible permission and strict proper procedures. She critically dissects his intentions, questioning the actual benefit of finding a disgraced noble lady interesting. Vim silently ponders her rigid definition of a lover, highly amused by her analytical approach to romance. Softening her harsh tone slightly, Charlotte sincerely thanks the powerful sorcerer for proving her innocence in front of the court. Hearing her quiet gratitude, Vim gazes down at her with a remarkably tender and gentle expression. Charlotte hesitantly admits her deep fear of ending up under someone else's absolute control once again. Before she can finish her thought, the magical light fades to reveal they have suddenly appeared inside a lavish bedroom. Looking around in absolute shock, Charlotte recognizes the ornate furniture and realizes she is safely back in her own room. Stepping back respectfully, Vim promises the bewildered lady that he will simply return on another day. With surprising gentleness, the towering sorcerer carefully lowers Charlotte down onto her luxurious sofa. Leaning down to meet her gaze, he assures her that he intends to keep a very close eye on the royal family's next hostile moves. Flashing a warm smile, Vim kindly advises the exhausted noblewoman to finally get some much-needed rest. Reaching out impulsively, Charlotte tries to call out to the departing sorcerer. Gently catching a lock of her dark hair, Vim tells her to think things over and boldly declares his intention to woo her relentlessly. He stares intensely into her eyes, leaving no room for doubt regarding his romantic determination. Releasing her hair, the sorcerer issues a final, quiet challenge for her to deeply consider his proposal. Charlotte sits in stunned silence, her eyes wide as she fully processes the weight of the legendary sorcerer's declaration. Wreathed in fading magical sparkles, Vim cheerfully waves goodbye and promises to see her later. Left entirely alone in her quiet room, Charlotte stares blankly ahead as she contemplates her drastically altered fate. Charlotte stands alone in her chambers, her hand trembling as she grips a lock of hair while wondering what on earth just happened. She recalls the startling kindness of Lord Vim, remembering how he carried her with a gentleness that made her feel like a precious treasure. Clasping her forehead in confusion, She questions how the sorcerer knew the location of her room and if his flirting was actually sincere. Sinking into her thoughts, she admits that the sudden upheaval of her fate is almost too much for her mind to process. A frantic pounding shatters the silence of the room as her father's voice echoes through the door, desperately asking if she is inside. The heavy doors burst open as her mother and father rush into the room with expressions of pure terror and relief. Lowering her head in a graceful bow, Charlotte softly apologizes to her parents for the immense worry she caused them. Her father stares at her with wide eyes, breathless as he confirms that his daughter has truly returned home safely. Her mother pulls her into a crushing embrace, her voice breaking as she expresses her joy that Charlotte is finally out of danger. The Duke explains that Lord Vim suddenly appeared in his office to deliver the shocking report about the events at the graduation party. Looking at her with a pained expression, her father asks for confirmation that Prince Alois truly committed such a public betrayal. Charlotte confirms the truth, explaining that the prince viewed her as an obstacle to his happiness and wanted her removed from his life. She recounts the nightmare of being publicly stripped of her engagement and accused of crimes she never committed in front of everyone. Her father grits his teeth in silent rage while her mother gasps, both horrified by the royal family's blatant cruelty toward their house. Charlotte informs them that the king was present and witnessed everything, urging her father to confirm the details with the palace immediately. She reflects on the cold reality that the king likely believed every fabricated report the prince presented without a single doubt. With a wary gaze, she notes that the monarch had already decided on her guilt long before the trial even began. The trauma of her previous lives begins to resurface, leaving her feeling small and broken as she relives the repetitive cycle of judgment. She thinks back to the 4 other futures where she was condemned as a villain, feeling the crushing weight of those inevitable deaths. Her mother caresses her face, acknowledging the terror Charlotte must have felt while facing such a heartless trial alone. Holding her daughter close, she tells Charlotte that she endured the suffering well and that her ordeal is finally over. Tears finally begin to fall as Charlotte's composure breaks, her hands clutching at her mother's dress in a release of pent-up agony. She confesses through her sobs that she had already given up on living and had even prayed for a quick execution to end the pain. Memories of her childhood self flood back, reminding her of a time when she was cherished and called their dear Charlotte. Her father takes her hands firmly, swearing that he will never allow the royal family to lay a finger on her ever again. Although safe, Charlotte finds herself unable to decipher Lord Vim's true intentions despite his heroic intervention. Regardless of the mystery surrounding him, she feels a profound need to properly express her gratitude for the life he saved. Locked in a family embrace, the warmth of her parents provides the first true comfort she has felt in 5 lifetimes. Far away in the royal palace, Lord Vim gazes out with a satisfied smirk, musing that the situation has finally become interesting. The click of his boots echoes through the corridors as he walks with the effortless grace of a man who owns his surroundings. He notes how remarkably convenient it is to enter and exit the palace through teleportation rather than dealing with gatekeepers. Entering his private quarters, Vim is greeted by the demon Alphas, who observes that the sorcerer looks unusually happy. Vim does not deny it, cheerfully declaring that he has finally met the woman of his destiny. He admits that from the very moment his eyes first landed on her at the party, he was completely captivated by her presence. Recalling her dignified aura and striking beauty, he remains mesmerized by the image of the noblewoman who refused to break. Dismissing his demonic servant, Vim tells Alphas he did a good job during the trial and grants him leave to depart. The demonic wolf grins hungrily, telling Vim to call him again whenever he finds another delicious-looking human to interrogate. Watching the creature vanish into black smoke, Vim dismisses the demon as a greedy glutton before turning to his desk. Relaxing into his chair, he shifts his focus toward the next phase of his plan to win over the Edelstein daughter. He decides that he must prepare a magnificent gift for Charlotte, determined to do whatever it takes to make her like him. Back in her room, Charlotte looks up with clear eyes, finally sensing that this 5th life might lead to a different conclusion. Lord Vim stands quietly on a high balcony, his cape fluttering in the gentle breeze as he looks outside. Gazing out over the grounds, he recalls the exact moment his eyes first landed on the disgraced noblewoman. The memory of Charlotte's striking face fills his mind, and he admits that her beauty completely captured his attention. Intrigued by her stoic demeanor, he fiercely wonders what kind of person truly lies beneath her dignified exterior. He reflects on the chaotic graduation party, questioning if she truly committed crimes severe enough to warrant the prince's cruel annulment. Stroking his chin in deep thought, Vim finds it incredibly hard to believe that such a refined lady could be guilty. He questions his own uncharacteristic actions, wondering why he felt so compelled to help Lady Charlotte in the first place. Recalling her utterly exhausted expression, he realizes that the accusations simply had to be fabricated. The memory of her bluntly asking for a quick execution continues to echo disturbingly in his mind. He logically concludes that a profoundly proud woman would never willingly reduce herself to such a pathetic state without a hidden reason. Vim remembers watching Prince Alois aggressively corner her while holding his new lover. Stepping out from the shadows at the party, the sorcerer had decided to break his own rule against intervening in noble disputes. He remembers staring deeply into Charlotte's surprised eyes as he took control of the escalating situation. His thoughts briefly flash to the satisfying moment he bound the treacherous prince in agonizing magical chains. He fondly recalls the sensation of gently holding a lock of Charlotte's dark hair before leaving her room. Back in the present, Vim dismisses his demonic familiar while instructing it to call him if another delicious human appears. Pacing his room, he resolves to prepare a deeply compelling story to properly entice Lady Charlotte into falling for him. He materializes a special travel permit in his hand, preparing for his next strategic move. Utilizing his immense magical authority, the sorcerer freely navigates the restricted corridors of the royal palace. Smiling with a hidden agenda, Vim decides it is time to pay a personal visit to the king. He strolls beneath the grand, ornate chandeliers that decorate the palace's luxurious ceilings. Royal guards and officials stand at attention as the legendary sorcerer passes through the halls. As he walks, Vim contemplates a critical loophole in the Demon Alphas's magical truth verification. He notes that the demonic inquisition strictly determines the truth based entirely on the witness's own memory and mental state. Thinking of Charlotte's resigned face, he realizes that if a witness genuinely believes their own testimony, the demon judges it as true. Therefore, if someone is thoroughly convinced of a falsehood, even a blatant lie can bypass the magic and be deemed absolute truth. Arriving at a heavily guarded set of double doors, Vim politely asks the knights for permission to enter. The doors open to reveal the tense king sitting at a large desk, flanked by an advisor and royal guards. The king acknowledges the sorcerer's arrival, noting with a heavy tone that Lord Vim has come just as expected. Flashing a confident, almost challenging smile, Vim steps into the room and casually asks if his presence is all right. Maintaining a facade of polite diplomacy, the king gestures toward an empty, luxurious armchair and offers him a seat. Walking toward the chair, Vim suspiciously notes that such humility is highly unusual for the arrogant royal family, wondering if they are plotting to outmaneuver him. Lord Vim privately muses that the king is likely unaware that the magic tribunal actually holds no binding power over his promises. Despite this convenient loophole, the sorcerer decides that there is absolutely no harm in remaining cautious around the royal family. Staring thoughtfully ahead, Vim decides to closely observe exactly how the royals plan to carry out the promised punishment. The scene shifts to the quiet, moonlit exterior of the royal palace where the private judgment of the disgraced prince is taking place. Prince Alois confesses his deep insecurities, explaining that interacting with the flawless Charlotte felt like dealing with a beautiful, emotionless doll. He remembers his former fiancée as an impeccable noblewoman who never showed a single hint of jealousy or emotional vulnerability. In stark contrast, Alois fondly recalls how Lady Krista constantly relied on his strength, praised his actions, and eagerly sought his presence. Driven by his fragile ego, the prince admits he ultimately convinced himself that his true love was always meant to be with the highly dependent Krista. Lord Vim coldly deduces the plot, noting that the prince defiled Krista's belongings using the exact same custom-made ink he had previously gifted to Charlotte. The sorcerer exposes how Alois matched the ink to Charlotte's personal items and even forged a threatening letter to ensure she took the complete fall. Realizing the pathetic truth of the situation, Vim concludes that the prince simply wanted to satisfy his need for validation by choosing a weaker woman. Vim is internally baffled by the sheer absurdity, wondering if the prince truly orchestrated this massive harassment plot just to feel doted upon by a lesser noble. Taking a calm sip of his tea, the sorcerer remarks that he has never heard of such a wildly distasteful case of manufactured drama. Pressing the interrogation further, Vim asks if the prince ordered a subordinate to disguise themselves as Charlotte before pushing Krista down the stairs. He also notes that His Highness deliberately arranged for third-party witnesses to be present during the staged accident to guarantee the conviction. By abusing his authority as her fiancé to check her schedule, Alois perfectly timed the harassment to ensure Charlotte had no reliable alibi to defend herself. Vim sarcastically praises the incredibly well-prepared plan, acknowledging that even the king wouldn't have been able to see through such thoroughly fabricated evidence. Hearing the full extent of the cruel plot, the disappointed king glares at his son and declares his actions to be utterly unforgivable. Desperate and panicking, Prince Alois points fingers and frantically shouts that Charlotte must also be deceiving them in some way. The king firmly shuts down his son's pathetic defense, reminding him that the demon alphas already judged Charlotte to be completely innocent of any betrayal. Grasping at straws, the sweating prince turns to Lord Vim and desperately begs him to conduct another magical inquisition to prove his point. Lord Vim narrows his eye, glaring coldly at the pathetic royal who still stubbornly refuses to accept his utter defeat. The sorcerer smoothly agrees to the request, but formally declares that he will treat this entirely as a direct job commission from the prince. The king nervously interjects, stepping in to ask the sorcerer what exactly the appropriate price for such a powerful magical request will be. A deeply sinister and terrifying smile slowly stretches across Lord Vim's face as he happily contemplates the heavy cost. Staring directly at the trembling prince, Vim politely asks if he may take his highness's life as payment for the demonic summoning. The prince's eye widens in sheer, paralyzing horror as he fully processes the sorcerer's deadly demand. Vim casually explains that summoning even a low-ranking demon requires a massive toll of 50 years' worth of magical power or lifespan. Feigning thought, he muses that for a high-ranking demon like Alphas, perhaps not even the prince's entire life would be enough to cover the immense cost. Trapped in a terrifying nightmare of his own making, Prince Alois clutches his head as a heavy silence falls over him. Desperate to survive, the cowardly prince asks if he can sacrifice the magical power of the entire country's mags instead of losing his own lifespan. The king fiercely rebukes his son, shouting that it is entirely pointless to search for pathetic loopholes to lessen his inevitable punishment. The king angrily glares at his son and declares that he will punish him on the spot, ordering the prince to reflect on his actions in the 6th underground prison of the royal palace. Horrified by the sentence, Prince Alois desperately yells out to his father and swears that he is not lying about his innocence. As the royal guards grab him firmly by the shoulders, the frantic prince promises that he never directly harmed Lady Charlotte. Ignoring his son's desperate pleas, the king coldly orders the guards to take him away to the underground prison immediately. The king flatly states that asking to be believed now is foolish, emphasizing that this sudden imprisonment is merely the consequence of his own treacherous actions. Turning his attention away from his screaming son, the king looks directly at the sorcerer and addresses Lord Vim. With a heavy sigh, the monarch asks the sorcerer if he will finally acknowledge that the royal promise of justice has been kept. Explaining that the prince will be placed in the 6th prison for a while, the king hopes this harsh punishment will satisfy Lady Charlotte's grievances. Vim recalls Charlotte's hollow eyes as she declared she would much rather have her head cut off than be sent to such a horrific place. Pondering the prince's intense fear, Vim wonders exactly what kind of hellish place the 6th prison is for his highness to reject it so strongly. Later, Vim walks down a dimly lit palace corridor and politely asks a nearby royal guard for a moment of his time. Standing alone before a heavy, reinforced wooden door marked with a 6, Vim prepares to inspect the infamous underground cell. Stepping inside the dark room, the sorcerer immediately gags as he is struck by an absolutely unbearable stench. He stares silently through the thick iron bars, taking in the dismal and oppressive atmosphere of the underground confinement. Frowning in sheer disgust, Vim notes that this horrible smell does not belong in a place meant for human habitation. The sorcerer observes the crumbling stone walls and heavily barred windows that let in only a miserable sliver of light. He grimly realizes that the facilities are just as terrible, if not entirely worse, than the awful stench initially suggested. Noting the dampness, Vim deduces that despite sunny weather in the capital, the perpetually wet floor and filthy bed would severely harm anyone's body. While he heard preparations were supposedly made for the prince's imprisonment, he seriously questions the malicious intent behind placing someone here. Staring through the cold iron bars, Vim wonders if the royal family honestly planned to throw the delicate Lady Charlotte into this exact cell. Knowing the prince orchestrated the entire situation, Vim suspects His Highness deliberately worsened the environment to break his fiancée completely. Disgusted by the unnecessary cruelty, he observes that the captors did not even bother to ventilate the stagnant, toxic air. Vim concludes that under these horrendous conditions, even a common stable would be a far better place to live. Smirking slightly, he decides that this miserable cell is actually a perfectly fitting room for His Highness to reflect on his arrogance. 6 quiet days pass since the disastrous graduation party, shifting the scene to a sunlit, peaceful garden at the Edelstein mansion. Charlotte sits quietly by a large window with a book, reflecting on how her entire life until now was strictly dedicated to socializing and becoming the perfect future queen. Sighing softly, she admits she has absolutely no idea how to spend her free time, especially since Lord Vim has not contacted her again. She recalls the chaotic events of the trial, regretting that she never got a proper chance to express her deep gratitude to the sorcerer who saved her. Clutching her book, she considers sending an official apology along with words of gratitude and various gifts, but hesitates to act. A vivid memory of Lord Vim leaning in closely and boldly declaring that he wants her forcefully invades her quiet thoughts. Staring out the window, Charlotte admits that in a fairy tale world she would surely fall in love, but she simply cannot bring herself to agree to his sudden advances. Grounded by the lingering trauma of her past lives, she decides it would be much safer to treat his romantic declaration as nothing more than a fleeting whim. A maid notes that it is time, while Charlotte internally wishes the man would just lose interest. Startled from her thoughts, Charlotte quickly tells the maid she is coming, her expression tinged with lingering confusion. In a grand parlor, Charlotte sits across from her parents and a royal official who announces the final judgment regarding the graduation party incident. The official reveals that Prince Alois orchestrated the entire event, including all the supposed harassment directed at Lady Krista. Charlotte closes her eyes and calmly accepts the news, having already suspected the truth. The official explains that the prince withheld the fabricated evidence for days, falsely claiming it would be disastrous if destroyed. Looking closely at the evidence, the official admits it was exceptionally well done, making it unsurprising that the king initially believed the deception. The king, sitting heavily in his throne, asks the sorcerer what his next move will be while acknowledging he cannot easily forgive his son's actions. The monarch declares that the Edelstein family will receive formal compensation along with one of the royal family's sacred treasures. Furthermore, he guarantees that the Edelstein family is permanently excused from attending royal gatherings without facing any political backlash. As for the disgraced Alois, he has been officially stripped of his right to the throne and is already locked away in the terrifying 6th underground prison. Stepping into the light, Lord Vim notes that he wants the prince to experience the horrific prison firsthand, clarifying to the shocked king that he does not intend to demand the death penalty. The sorcerer firmly dictates that the prince must endure the dark cell for at least 1 full month. If the royal fails to show genuine remorse after that period, he will be transferred to a separate facility to live the rest of his life under the same harsh conditions as a commoner. The king's advisor politely suggests that accepting this strict punishment for Alois would be the most helpful resolution for everyone involved. Back in the parlor, Charlotte looks slightly surprised as she admits the prince's punishment is significantly harsher than she had ever imagined. She silently realizes that Lord Vim's powerful intervention undeniably influenced the sheer severity of the royal decree. Accepting the outcome with quiet dignity, Charlotte states she has nothing more to add and will abide by His Majesty's final decision. The king visibly relaxes, letting out a relieved sigh as he expresses his deep gratitude for the sorcerer's mercy. He sincerely hopes that Lady Charlotte, after surviving such a difficult ordeal, will finally find true happiness once again. The scene shifts back to the present where her father carefully mentions that they should consider introducing a new potential fiancé to secure her future. Her father nervously reveals that Lord Vim Gisbert himself has already submitted an official marriage proposal for her hand. Charlotte's eyes widen in absolute shock, her breath catching as she struggles to process the unbelievable news. Displaying his distinctive star-shaped pendant, Vim previously explained to the king that as a foreigner, he respects the nation's customs. Standing confidently before the royal hearth, the sorcerer stated that proposing to a noblewoman of this country required informing His Majesty first. Vim smoothly added that he had, of course, also properly informed Duke Edelstein of his romantic intentions. Flashing a charming and determined smile, Vim gently urges the flustered Charlotte to think about his proposal just one more time. Charlotte stands paralyzed in shock as she realizes Lord Vim officially proposed marriage to her right in front of the king. An official notes that the legendary 24-year-old magician is exactly 8 years older than the young noblewoman. The king eagerly expresses his desire to give his royal blessing to what he considers an exceptionally wonderful match. Clutching her dress in despair, Charlotte realizes the royal family is merely using her as a convenient pawn to tie the genius sorcerer to their kingdom. She stares blankly ahead, terrified of the severe political consequences if she openly refuses his grand proposal right here. Panic sets in as she wonders if rejecting the match will directly provoke the king's deep resentment. Suddenly, her protective father rushes to her side and gently pulls her away from her spiraling anxiety. Standing tall, the Duke turns his stern, unwavering gaze directly toward His Majesty. He boldly reminds the monarch of the royal family's recent sworn promise to never force Lady Charlotte into anything against her will. Pressing the issue, the Duke firmly questions whether this protective promise also extends to sudden marriage arrangements. Lord Vim closes his eyes and sighs heavily, clearly annoyed by the troublesome political interference. Sweating nervously, the king asks Vim if he was intentionally pressuring the girl, prompting the sorcerer to deny the accusation. Vim coldly clarifies that he never requested a forced marriage, but merely asked for formal permission to propose. Realizing his error, the flustered king quickly admits that he may have overstepped his royal bounds. Seeking to diffuse the escalating tension, the monarch hastily declares that the royal family has no intention of forcing the union. He officially decrees that the marriage will be left entirely up to the free will of Lord Vim and Lady Charlotte. Smiling with deep satisfaction, the sorcerer happily accepts the king's fair ruling. Shooting a sharp glare at the monarch, Vim warns him to refrain from ever using his royal power to impose on the young lady again. He makes it devastatingly clear that Lady Charlotte will no longer be sacrificed for the royal family's political convenience. Dropping gracefully to one knee, Lord Vim turns to Charlotte and smoothly declares that he has come to court her. Leaning in with a flushed, eager expression, he asks if she has given his proposal any positive thought since their last meeting. Charlotte looks away nervously, completely overwhelmed by the legendary sorcerer's intense and sudden approach. Her father gently intervenes, placing a comforting hand on her arm while noting that sorting out her chaotic feelings will take time. The Duke firmly states that he fully intends to respect his daughter's feelings, regardless of whether she accepts the proposal. He reassures Charlotte that she is completely free to delay her answer or even reject the powerful magician outright. Staring directly at Vim, the protective father insists that the sorcerer must respect her boundaries as well. The Duke declares that he only cares about Charlotte's happiness and will support her engagement to anyone she truly desires. He makes it crystal clear that if Charlotte remains unconvinced, he will absolutely never approve of the marriage. Deeply moved by her father's fierce protection, Charlotte feels a warm swell of love and gratitude. Vim meets the Duke's stern gaze with calm resolve, respectfully acknowledging the father's protective feelings. Turning his attention back to the hesitant noblewoman, Vim gently extends his open hand toward her. Looking up into her surprised eyes, the bold sorcerer smoothly suggests that they simply start as lovers on a trial basis. Proposing a trial period, Vim explains that even commoners have a courtship phase, meaning she can simply break up with him if she ends up disliking their arrangement. Flashing a confident smile, the sorcerer playfully asks her if taking a trial run isn't such a bad idea. Charlotte internally notes that if a man as powerful as Lord Vim truly wanted to force the engagement, he could easily silence her father. She rationally decides that refusing her powerful benefactor before even getting to know him would be incredibly rude. Looking down, she convinces herself that once he sees her true personality, his sudden feelings of love will surely fade. She resolves to simply act exactly as she always does until the sorcerer's romantic interest inevitably cools down. Reaching her hand out to meet his, she formally accepts his invitation to begin their courtship. Kneeling gracefully, Vim takes her hand with a gentle touch and sincerely thanks her for giving him a chance. Blushing slightly with a warm smile, he vows to do his absolute best to make her truly fall for him. Charlotte's heart gives a sudden thud as she stares at his earnest expression, her cheeks flushing in silent surprise. Recovering her polite composure, she offers a small smile and formally states that she looks forward to their time together. Sometime later, Charlotte waits patiently by the grand stone pillars of her family's lush, sprawling estate. Wondering if her guest will be satisfied with the arrangements, she mentally reviews her elaborate preparations for his visit. She hopes her careful selection of various premium tea leaves and sweet cakes will be enough to please him. Lord Vim arrives at the estate, looking striking and elegant in his signature dark cloak and immaculate white trousers. Startled by his sudden appearance, Charlotte stands at attention beneath the garden's leafy canopy. Walking toward her with a bright smile, the towering sorcerer cheerfully wishes Lady Charlotte a good afternoon. Offering a graceful bow, she politely greets him in return and thanks him for taking the time to visit her today. Gazing around the beautifully manicured trees, Vim praises the wonderful garden and compliments the obvious skill of her gardener. As they stroll past the grand Edelstein mansion, Charlotte explains that the massive estate actually features 3 distinct gardens. She leads him through the green garden, noting that its focus on ornamental greenery over flowers creates a uniquely peaceful atmosphere. Catching a falling leaf, Vim smiles warmly and expresses his desire for her to show him the other 2 gardens someday. He gazes down at her with a remarkably tender and affectionate expression, clearly enjoying their peaceful walk. Charlotte stares back in quiet silence, her cheeks tinting pink as she struggles to process his smooth, continuous flirting. Regaining her focus, she gestures toward a beautifully decorated outdoor table and invites him to take a seat. Vim is completely surprised to see an absolutely massive spread of cakes and light snacks covering the table as she tells him to make himself comfortable. Blinking in confusion, the The sorcerer asks if anyone else is joining them, to which Charlotte firmly confirms it is just the two of them. Looking slightly embarrassed, she explains that she prepared a wide variety of treats simply because she didn't know his personal tastes yet. Closing his eyes in pure contentment, Vim takes a sip of tea and admits that having all of this prepared just for him makes him incredibly happy. Charlotte stares at him with wide eyes, completely taken aback by how genuinely pleased the legendary sorcerer acts over such a small gesture. Watching him peacefully enjoy the tea, she softly calls out his name to grab his attention. Looking at him with deep sincerity, she finally takes the opportunity to properly thank him for saving her life during the disastrous graduation party. Pouring the tea, Charlotte gently explains that this small gesture is her way of expressing deep gratitude for his intervention with the demon. Lifting the delicate teacup, Vim smiles and realizes this deep gratitude explains the incredibly extravagant spread. Leaning in, he smoothly confesses that he simply fell in love at first sight because he was drawn to her wildly unexpected actions. Charlotte freezes in shock, her eyes wide as she stammers over his sudden declaration of love at first sight. Vim passionately recounts how his initial crush was dashed by her royal engagement, only to be completely revived when she boldly lay on the floor and bewildered the knights. While Charlotte cringes at how unbecoming her actions were for a duke's daughter, Vim cheerfully praises her performance as truly the best. Memories of her weeping parents and dumbfounded friends flash through Charlotte's mind as she recalls the sheer chaos she caused. Despite the overwhelming embarrassment washing over her, she processes the heavy weight of his blunt confession. Unbothered by her shock, Vim enthusiastically continues praising how brilliantly she outshined everyone in the face of absolute adversity. Covering her mouth in shame, Charlotte internally agonizes over her deeply unladylike display at the graduation party. She remembers how her desperate survival tactics left the entire high society utterly speechless and confused. Lowering her gaze, she silently admits that while she does not regret her actions, the lingering embarrassment is still hard to bear. Flashing a warm and genuine smile, Vim assures her that he actually deeply appreciated her bold defiance in that moment. Touched by his unexpected kindness, Charlotte offers a soft, sincere thank you. She bashfully confesses that she wasn't actually composed at all, admitting her desperate survival instincts just made everything highly embarrassing. Vim gazes at her affectionately, noting that her unpredictable nature perfectly masked her desperation behind a veil of absolute confidence. Leaning closer, the sorcerer admits that her captivating mystery makes it impossible for him to stop thinking about her. Staring intensely into her eyes, he playfully asks just how much more she intends to captivate his heart. Processing his words, Charlotte coldly deduces that his romantic interest is entirely rooted in the bizarre novelty of her past actions. She logically assumes that once he realizes she is actually just a typical, boring noblewoman, his fleeting feelings will completely fade. Looking away with a stoic expression, she internally prays that he gets utterly bored of her as quickly as possible. A gentle breeze rustles the leaves around the quiet, sunlit gazebo where the two share their tense afternoon tea. Deciding to wrap up the visit, Charlotte offers a polite bow and gracefully thanks him for the enjoyable time together. Unfazed by her polite dismissal, Vim states that seeing this refined, different side of her only deepens his intense fascination. He compliments her deeply composed demeanor, declaring that her traditional elegance is just as charming as her chaotic defiance. Charlotte modestly deflects the praise, claiming she was actually quite nervous since she hadn't attended a proper tea party in a long time. Vim bursts into light-hearted laughter, thoroughly amused by how skillfully she dodges his relentless romantic advances with her strong guard. Turning to leave, he boldly remarks that her stubborn resistance only makes flirting with her infinitely more worthwhile. Glancing over his shoulder, the towering sorcerer promises that he will definitely return to see her again. Flashing one final, charming smile, he playfully asks the silent noblewoman to wait for his inevitable return. Watching his retreating figure, Charlotte hardens her resolve, strictly reminding herself that they are merely lovers in name only and she will never return his feelings. Refusing to offer any insincere words, she remains perfectly silent so as not to give the legendary sorcerer a single shred of false hope. Lord Vim gently reaches out and takes Charlotte's hand in his own as they prepare to part ways. Bowing gracefully, the sorcerer presses a soft, lingering kiss against the back of her hand. Charlotte's eyes widen in sheer shock, her cheeks instantly burning red at his unexpectedly bold gesture. Stepping back with a smooth smile, Vim casually asks if he may visit her again the day after tomorrow. The magical tension lingers in the air as his parting words hang between them. Charlotte internally admits that since this was her first real social interaction in 4 lifetimes, even small things deeply unsettle her. Clasping her hands tightly, she tells herself that she desperately needs to stay calm and regain her composure. Despite her efforts to cool down, she realizes the intense heat in her cheeks still hasn't subsided. True to his word, Lord Vim suddenly begins visiting her family's estate almost every single day. Although his sudden teleportations to the entrance initially terrified the servants, he never actually stays for very long. Charlotte assumes he is just being considerate of her time, as he simply drinks a cup or two of tea before leaving. However, he always makes sure to flash her a dazzling, utterly charming smile before he departs. Charlotte stares back with a slightly exasperated expression, utterly exhausted by his relentless charm. Dropping his head slightly, he always asks her the exact same question every single time he leaves. He relentlessly pesters her to admit if she has grown to like him even a little bit, making her wish he'd be more careful with his words. When she scolds him for repeating himself, he unapologetically counters that she looks as undeniably cute as ever. Charlotte narrows her eyes, fiercely wondering if the sorcerer is deliberately trying to exasperate her until she just gives in. She grumbles that allowing herself to be swept along by his pace would be the exact same as accepting his sudden marriage proposal. A sudden realization sparks in her dark eyes as she observes her persistent suitor. Sitting elegantly across from her, Vim calmly sips his tea while looking entirely perfectly at ease in the high society setting. Noticing her intense gaze, he pauses his drink and playfully asks if there is something strange about him. Realizing she was staring too intently, Charlotte quickly averts her eyes and politely apologizes. She notes that he seems incredibly accustomed to tea parties and asks if he studied formal etiquette alongside his magic. Vim explains that a remarkably strict friend used to ruthlessly tap his forehead whenever he made a single mistake. Flashing a nostalgic smile, he admits he is grateful for the harsh lessons since they kept him from embarrassing himself today. Staring softly ahead, the sorcerer quietly wonders aloud if that strict old friend is currently doing well. Intrigued by this rare glimpse into his past, Charlotte leans in and asks what kind of person his friend is. Before Vim can answer, a cheerful maid suddenly interrupts their quiet conversation to deliver the dessert course. Pouting slightly, Vim leans forward and boldly demands that Charlotte pay more attention to him rather than his absent friend. Charlotte sighs internally, realizing she can absolutely never let her guard down around this impossibly smooth man. Her breath suddenly catches in her throat as she takes her first bite of the newly delivered sweet treat. Watching her eyes sparkle with pure delight, Vim cheerfully notes that her reaction is entirely too cute. Resting his chin on his hands, he softly asks if showing him such a genuine face means she is finally opening up to him. Ignoring his flirting, Charlotte happily explains that it has been years since she last tasted this specific milk sorbet. She gazes down at the dish with a soft, melancholic smile, admitting that the familiar flavor makes her feel deeply nostalgic. Taking another eager bite, she notes that frozen desserts are incredibly rare in their consistently warm kingdom. She excitedly recounts how her older brother brought this exact dessert back as a souvenir from abroad a few years ago. She remembers being completely moved by the taste and heavily surprised that the normally quick-melting treat had remained perfectly frozen. Smiling warmly at the sorcerer, she expresses her sheer joy that today's dessert tastes exactly the same as her precious memory. Pausing with her spoon in midair, a sudden, startling connection begins to form in her mind. She recalls her brother mentioning that a specific, highly skilled magician had helped him keep the dessert frozen during his travels. Vim's expression shifts as he asks if her brother's name happens to be Daniel. Charlotte confirms that Daniel Edelstein is turning 24 this year, prompting Vim to quietly note they are the exact same age. Suddenly standing up, Vim abruptly announces he has something to do and swiftly excuses himself from the table. Charlotte watches in utter confusion as the sorcerer hastily departs, leaving her to wonder about his mysterious connection to her brother. A handsome, dark-haired young man bursts through the grand doors, his face lighting up with pure joy as he calls out Charlotte's name. Rushing forward to greet him, Charlotte offers a soft smile and warmly welcomes him back to the estate. Throwing her arms around him, she buries her face into his chest and cries out that she desperately wanted to see him. Tears stream down her flushed cheeks as she confesses how deeply she missed him over the long, agonizing half-year they were apart. Startled by his sudden movement, her feet leave the floor as he effortlessly lifts her into the air. He playfully spins her around in a tight embrace, completely ignoring the strict bounds of high society etiquette. Charlotte reflects that her brother had left the estate for work a month before the graduation party, making this their first reunion across 4 miserable lifetimes. Gently rubbing her head, Daniel warmly notes that while she is no longer a child, she will always be his adorable little sister. Smiling with genuine relief, She teases that he hasn't changed at all and admits that his warm presence makes her feel alive again. She recalls fond memories of her brother constantly scolding her in the past for stubbornly trying to do the jobs of the tutors and servants. Remembering his exasperated pleas, she recalls him warning her that working too hard would ruin their precious dinner time together. Snapping back to the present, Daniel smiles eagerly and asks if her graduation party was as dazzling and wonderful as she hoped. Charlotte suddenly falls silent, her eyes widening in pure panic as she struggles to formulate a response to his innocent question. Learning the truth of the party, Daniel furiously draws his sword and vows to cut down Prince Alois immediately while the panicked Charlotte hides behind him. Stopping his violent rampage, Daniel looks back in confusion as his sister gently tugs on his sleeve. She tells him that she just wants to bask in the joy of his return, suggesting they discuss the disastrous party at a more relaxed pace after dinner. Reminding him that their parents are waiting in the dining hall, she insists on hearing about his travels first, successfully calming his protective rage. Sitting together at the grand dinner table, their father notes that work has settled while their mother asks about Lady Letitia's upcoming arrival. Daniel proudly announces his intention to officially proceed with his wedding preparations, earning a heartfelt congratulation from his beaming sister. Charlotte silently marvels at Lady Letitia, deeply respecting the wonderful woman for somehow accepting her brother's highly eccentric personality. Staring sternly at his son, the Duke commands Daniel to properly make Lady Letitia happy, to which the young man confidently agrees. Daniel casually mentions that he has already decided on a date, noting it is proper for him to marry before Charlotte's scheduled wedding the following year. A heavy, awkward silence falls over the table as the Duchess sadly notes that while Letitia is welcome, Charlotte's situation has completely changed. Anticipating a violent reaction, the Duke immediately urges Daniel to stay calm and listen closely to the terrible news. Trembling with uncontrollable rage, Daniel grips the edge of the table and furiously questions if his beloved sister is being falsely accused. Losing his temper completely, he screams curses at the prince, absolutely refusing to believe that an angel like Charlotte could do any wrong. The Duke firmly reminds him that the political impact of the event is immense, even though the prince has already lost his right to the throne. Ignoring his father's logic, Daniel seriously asks if he should just secretly make the treacherous royal disappear, prompting Charlotte to beg him not to act recklessly. Smiling wryly, Charlotte internally sweats at the realization that her overly protective brother would absolutely commit murder if she asked him to. Reaching out to gently hold his trembling hands, she assures him that the disgraced prince is already rotting away in the sunless underground chambers. Staring at him with a remarkably soft and peaceful expression, she sincerely thanks her brother for getting so furiously angry on her behalf. His intense rage finally breaking under her gentle touch, Daniel sighs in defeat and promises not to interfere as long as she is satisfied with the outcome. Charlotte gently tells her brother that if he acts recklessly and gets hurt, it would only make her even sadder. Overwhelmed by his sister's kindness, Daniel tearfully declares that she truly is such a good girl. He wipes his eyes and angrily notes that Alois is infuriating, but they should be glad she avoided marrying someone like him. Boasting the wealth of the prestigious Edelstein family, Daniel fiercely promises to take care of her for the rest of her life without restrictions if she wishes to remain unmarried. Charlotte silently reflects that noble ladies who cannot marry usually leave their family homes to become governesses or nuns to support themselves. Looking down thoughtfully, she admits that living a working life actually does not sound like such a bad thing to her. She realizes there is a high chance people will look at her with disdain if she stays, prompting Daniel to call her name in concern. Charlotte internally notes that she refuses to get in the way of her brother and Lady Letitia, knowing full well he is already worried about her future. Daniel offers a reassuring smile, telling her not to hold back and promising to accept her true feelings no matter what. He excitedly suggests that she could become a tutor for his future children or act as Letitia's conversation partner if she hates doing nothing. Reminding her that new marriage proposals are unlikely to arrive anytime soon, he warmly encourages her to take her time thinking about her future. Sweating nervously alongside her father, Charlotte stammers and admits that she has actually already received one official marriage proposal. Daniel freezes in place, letting out a confused noise as his sister's unexpected confession completely shatters his assumptions. Looking away with a guilty expression, Charlotte confesses that she has entered into a romantic relationship with the legendary magician Lord Vim Gisbert. Daniel stares blankly ahead, his mind completely short-circuiting as he tries to process the sheer absurdity of the news. Unable to comprehend the situation, he blurts out another confused noise in absolute disbelief. His shock instantly morphs into terrifying fury as he glares at their trembling father and aggressively demands a full explanation. Outside the tense dining room, Two small birds sit peacefully on a leafy branch overlooking the estate. Sometime later, the atmosphere grows incredibly hostile as Daniel and Lord Vim glare fiercely at each other while Charlotte sweats nervously between them. Breaking the heavy silence, Vim calmly acknowledges Daniel and notes that he truly is Lady Charlotte's older brother. Glaring at the sorcerer, Daniel coldly declares that he will need to completely re-evaluate their friendship at this point. Narrowing his eyes with deadly seriousness, Daniel threatens that he is naturally leaning toward ending their relationship entirely. Unfazed by the threat, Vim flashes a cheerful smile and happily suggests they simply become brothers-in-law instead of friends. Daniel furiously snaps at the sorcerer for saying such ridiculous things, angrily asking who he thinks is to blame for this chaotic situation. Losing his temper, Daniel shouts that he absolutely cannot overlook an idiot who proposes to a woman right when she is heartbroken. Clenching his fists, the protective older brother violently screams at Vim for failing to wait for a more appropriate time. Vim unapologetically counters that it is only natural to make a move on such a charming young lady before some other man steals her away. Brushing off Daniel's anger, the confident sorcerer points out that he has both the immense wealth and magical power required to perfectly protect her. Flashing a smug grin, Vim cheekily reminds Daniel that he even complimented his striking appearance in the past. Flustered by the unreasonable logic, Daniel grumbles that despite Vim being better than other suitors, he still cannot stand the man. Watching the two men bicker flawlessly, Charlotte sighs and realizes that they truly were close friends after all. While Daniel stubbornly denies their friendship, Charlotte internally marvels at how easily her brother shows his emotions to the playfully whining sorcerer. Daniel explains that 8 years ago, on his way to study abroad, he found Vim injured after a failed magic spell. He secretly protected the injured Vim because rare magicians are often unjustly captured and exploited by dangerous factions. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, the two surprisingly ended up getting along well and formed a close bond. Charlotte gently smiles and notes that protecting someone in need perfectly reflects her older brother's strong sense of justice. Completely ignoring the touching moment, Daniel suddenly shouts that he never should have protected the sorcerer 8 years ago if he had known things would turn out like this. Vim pouts dramatically, whining that his friend is being incredibly cruel to him after everything they have been through together. Vim playfully argues that protecting him was the right call since he helped Daniel navigate complex laws, which the strict noble begrudgingly admits he appreciates. Daniel confidently declares they are even since he repaid the favor by teaching Vim proper noble manners, leaving the sorcerer whining for a little more kindness. Reverting to logic, Daniel explains that if a duke's house openly interfered with a foreign magician, Vim's homeland would be put on high alert and ordered to retrieve him. Daniel aggressively tells the fake-crying Vim to stop pretending to be sensitive, while the sorcerer complains about how lonely he felt when his best friend hid his identity. Pausing his theatrical complaints, Vim's expression softens into a remarkably gentle and sincere look. He fondly admits that it is absolutely incredible to think he has had a connection to Charlotte through Daniel all this time. Smirking playfully, Vim boldly asks if this means he and Lady Charlotte are tied together by the red string of fate. Instantly enraged by the brazen flirtation, Daniel draws his sword and furiously promises to cut that string of fate right here and now. Charlotte watches in silent despair, realizing that her brother's overprotectiveness is rapidly escalating the situation into a brawl again. Stepping in to diffuse the tension, she softly tells Daniel that she survived the disastrous party solely because Lord Vim was alive and present. Expressing her profound gratitude to both men, she politely asks if they will allow her the chance to host them properly. Daniel's angry expression softens slightly as he looks down into his sister's earnest, pleading eyes. Yielding to her heartfelt request, Daniel sighs heavily and begrudgingly agrees to a temporary ceasefire with the smug sorcerer. Vim immediately flashes a dazzling smile and smoothly offers his arm to escort the beautiful Charlotte. Blushing with a happy smile, Charlotte takes his arm as they walk together, leaving the thoroughly annoyed Daniel trailing behind. They finally arrive at the White Garden, a breathtaking sanctuary where pure white flowers are currently in magnificent full bloom. The group settles down at an elegant outdoor table nestled beautifully among the vibrant, meticulously arranged blossoms. Daniel praises the lush garden as the gardener's absolute masterpiece, proudly noting how beautiful his family's estate is. Vim agrees that the garden is beautiful, but smoothly adds that Lady Charlotte herself is a truly wonderful young lady. He relentlessly praises her graceful manners and impeccable appearance, ensuring every single compliment is directed solely at her. Charlotte blushes deeply, her heart racing as Vim's continuous, smooth flattery leaves her feeling completely overwhelmed. In her flustered and distracted state, her hand slips and the delicate teacup rattles loudly against its saucer. Quickly recovering her elegant composure, she softly apologizes for almost dropping the expensive teacup. Smiling triumphantly at his friend, Vim tells Daniel that his treasured sister is undoubtedly the kingdom's finest lady. Daniel smirks back, finally understanding why the sorcerer never stopped drunkenly bragging about the mysterious Edelstein sister during their travels. Vim openly admits that before meeting her in person, he honestly didn't believe a woman as flawless as Daniel described could actually exist. Charlotte sits quietly with a weary expression, exhausted by the realization that the two reunited friends have done nothing but non-stop compliment her. Vim playfully nudges Daniel, admitting that he knows he can be quite a difficult and eccentric person to deal with at times. He fondly notes that despite his teasing, Lady Charlotte is always incredibly proper and never treats him coldly. The sorcerer explains that she always goes out of her way to ensure the tea party feels comfortable, carefully considering the weather and the guests' needs. He accurately observes that she always maintains the cool, composed exterior expected of a high-ranking noble lady. Looking at her with deep affection, Vim confesses that he genuinely loves the underlying, authentic kindness she simply cannot completely hide. Charlotte's hands freeze as she holds her teacup, profoundly moved by how accurately and warmly the sorcerer understands her true nature. The two men watch in mild surprise as she suddenly lowers her head, desperately trying to hide her deeply flushed face. She softly asks for a moment's pardon, completely overwhelmed by the intense sincerity of Vim's public confession. Smiling softly at her adorable, bashful reaction, Vim internally reiterates just how much he truly likes the incredible noblewoman. Vim thinks to himself with a gentle smile that he really does like her. Charlotte looks up with a slightly confused expression as she lets out a soft gasp. Daniel yells her name in shock while Vim excitedly greets Lady Charlotte with a bright smile. The legendary sorcerer smiles warmly at Charlotte with an undeniable affection shining in his gentle eyes. Charlotte turns her face away slightly as a deep blush quickly spreads across her soft cheeks. Feeling completely flustered by the sudden attention, Charlotte nervously thinks to herself that this isn't good. She recalls getting engaged to Prince Alois at 8 and hoping they would eventually love each other. Looking back, she bitterly realizes that her innocent childhood dream ended as just a foolish fantasy. She thinks it is completely unfair because she could have brushed it off if he spoke lightly. Daniel forcefully clears his throat with a loud cough to interrupt the deeply intimate romantic atmosphere. Charlotte nervously asks what is wrong while Vim turns his attention toward the highly annoyed Daniel. Daniel angrily demands that Vim back off while promising Charlotte he will attend future tea parties. Daniel asks Vim if he is always this annoying after finishing the delicious shellfish confit by himself. Daniel sharply defends his fast eating by stating that cold food disrespects the restaurant and tastes terrible. Daniel smugly exposes Vim for secretly cooling his tea with magic while the sorcerer panics completely. Vim quickly covers Daniel's mouth with his hand and nervously insists that everything is fine now. Vim apologizes for teasing him too much and promises to have his chef recreate the shellfish dish. Daniel coldly crosses his arms and reluctantly decides to let the annoying incident slide for now. The three of them sit comfortably at the elegant table enjoying a brief moment of quiet peace. Charlotte gently clutches her chest in deep relief and quietly thanks goodness that the argument is over. She reassures herself with a soft sigh that everything is finally going to be completely okay now. A warm greeting echoes softly across the beautifully bright and lushly decorated garden of the grand estate. Vim tenderly kisses her hand and smoothly compliments her by saying she looks incredibly beautiful today. Daniel clenches his fists in sheer rage and violently screams the annoying sorcerer's name in pure frustration. Daniel quickly steps between the two lovers while fiercely demanding to know why Vim is acting suspiciously. Daniel aggressively tells the powerful mage to go back to work while loudly declaring his protective brotherly intentions. Charlotte fondly remembers being incredibly nervous about showing gratitude to Lord Vim and navigating their new romance. Watching the two men bicker playfully suddenly makes Charlotte deeply realize she wants to see her friends. Charlotte curiously interrupts their silly fight and asks Daniel if he is supposed to be working right now. Daniel suddenly panics and sincerely apologizes to Charlotte because he has to head straight to work immediately. Daniel bitterly complains about the annoying trouble with the traded goods while Charlotte sympathetically wishes him well. Charlotte calmly reminds her stressed brother that this immense responsibility simply cannot be avoided as the heir. She kindly tells Vim that they are all heavily counting on him to take care of Daniel. Daniel fiercely warns Vim that he absolutely will not forgive him if he does anything weird to Charlotte. Vim casually suggests Daniel should head to the site already and offers to magically teleport him there. Daniel seriously trusts Vim with his sister while Charlotte gives them a very suspicious yet appreciative smile. A sudden bright flash of powerful teleportation magic instantly whisks the protective brother away from the garden. Charlotte smiles softly and confesses she is extremely happy that it is finally just the two of them. Vim looks deeply into her eyes and gently accuses her of playfully teasing his heart once again. Charlotte admires a beautiful peach tart she received and delightfully notes how incredibly fresh it still looks. Charlotte happily takes a bite of the delicious pastry while thoroughly enjoying the sweet flavor. A sudden wave of pleasant surprise washes over Charlotte as she processes the incredible taste. Vim leans forward and gently asks Charlotte if she really loves the sweet cake too. Charlotte warmly praises Vim for knowing so many delicious things after tasting the incredibly sweet peaches. Vim casually explains that he frequently visits local shops while traveling across the entire continent for work. He cheerfully notes the seasonal tart is carefully crafted using fresh peaches grown by the owner himself. A remarkably soft and gentle smile slowly spreads across the powerful sorcerer's typically imposing face. Vim looks at her fondly and happily declares that buying this specific pastry was the right choice. Feeling deeply curious about his refined tastes, Charlotte politely asks if he eats this specific tart often. Resting his hand thoughtfully near his chin, Vim honestly admits that it has actually been a while. He explains that the popular shop takes no reservations and often completely sells out before he arrives. Utterly bewildered by this startling revelation, Charlotte looks at him and questions how he managed to obtain it. Vim casually reveals that he simply lined up outside the store at opening time like everyone else. He confidently explains that removing his official robe and hiding his mage insignia makes him completely unnoticeable. Charlotte internally marvels that a terrifying man who once shook the entire continent would do something so mundane. She comically imagines the notoriously powerful Demon King quietly waiting in a long bakery line like an ordinary citizen. She keenly realizes he possesses enough absolute authority to easily force someone else to stand in line instead. Catching her deeply bewildered stare, Vim lets out a soft and highly amused chuckle under his breath. Charlotte tentatively asks the legendary sorcerer if he always insists on buying things himself in this manner. Vim firmly confirms this by stating he refuses to let others buy gifts for his dear loved ones. Charlotte blushes fiercely as Vim boldly declares he never wants to give up the right to choose either. He promises to show her many more wonderful things and urges her to look forward to next time. Charlotte lowers her gaze while touched that he brought rare treats without relying on his convenient teleportation magic. Smiling with genuine warmth, Charlotte looks up and sincerely thanks the thoughtful sorcerer for his incredible kindness. She suddenly recalls receiving many expensive gifts from Prince Alois during their long and ultimately doomed engagement. Although the items were extremely high quality and trendy, she wonders if he personally chose any of them. A bitter memory surfaces of her politely thanking the indifferent prince for a lovely new brooch. The cold prince had simply glanced away dismissively without showing even a single ounce of genuine affection. She vividly remembers the crushing realization that the beautiful gift had actually been selected by someone else entirely. Charlotte sadly acknowledges that Lord Alois possessed zero interest in her and always delegated gift selection to his servants. She happily concludes that Vim's incredible personal thoughtfulness is exactly why she feels so genuinely overjoyed right now. Hoping to learn more about him, Charlotte asks Vim what he considers the most delicious sweet on the continent. Acknowledging the extreme difficulty of the question, Vim thoughtfully mentions the famous opera cake from the Marian Kingdom. He then playfully suggests the rich cheesecake from the Alancia Empire might also be a worthy top contender. Using dazzling magical illusions, Vim beautifully illustrates the fascinating history and rich culture behind every single delicious sweet. Charlotte feels the heavy tension in her shoulders completely melt away thanks to Vim's wonderfully unpretentious speaking manner. Startled by his sudden suggestion to end their lovely meeting, Charlotte realizes she completely forgot the passage of time. A heavy wave of disappointment briefly hits her as she realizes it is already time to go back home. Charlotte suddenly grasps her chest with a deep blush as a profound new emotion violently takes root inside her. The legendary sorcerer watches her carefully with a remarkably tender and affectionate gaze shining in his bright eyes. Vim leans in extremely close while intimately holding Charlotte's trembling hand across the small table. Staring intensely into her eyes, the powerful sorcerer gently asks if they should stop discussing his departure. Charlotte gazes back at him with a wide trembling eye as intense emotions suddenly overwhelm her. Stuttering nervously, she completely fails to form a coherent sentence while blushing deeply under his intense gaze. Vim softly confesses the honest truth that he genuinely wants to spend much more time with her. He smiles warmly and admits her slight loneliness over his departure makes him feel incredibly happy. Charlotte flinches slightly as a deep blush violently paints her cheeks at his bold romantic confession. Turning her face away defensively, she nervously claims that their current physical distance is perfectly fine. Vim playfully laughs and asks if she was only interested in his fascinating magical illusions instead. He smoothly requests permission to finally drop the formal honorifics and call her simply by her name. Charlotte mentally notes that his perfectly balanced and consistent requests are incredibly difficult to outright refuse. She decides to just give in and let him do whatever he wants, so he will leave. Vim enthusiastically cheers and warmly thanks Charlotte for finally granting him this highly desired personal privilege. He cheerfully encourages her to completely drop the polite honorifics when speaking directly to him as well. She strictly refuses by reminding him that a noble lady cannot address non-relatives without proper formal titles. She politely insists on continuing to call him Lord Vim exactly as she has always done before. Vim flashes a confident smile and declares he will simply have to try much harder to win. He suddenly grabs her delicate hand again, causing her to gasp slightly in pure startled surprise. Kneeling gracefully, he romantically kisses her fingers and asks what he must do to open her heart. Leaning dangerously close to her blushing face, he desperately pleads with her to tell him the answer. He gently reaches up to softly caress her cheek while staring deeply into her trembling eyes. Charlotte freezes completely as a furious blush overtakes her face under his incredibly tender physical touch. His large hand continues to affectionately stroke her soft cheek, sending wild shivers down her spine. She panics internally while completely bewildered by her own intense reactions to his gentle tickling touches. He sensually whispers that she is always completely free to touch him as much as she desires. Her eyes widen in absolute shock as her heart pounds violently from his dangerously seductive teasing. A furious Daniel suddenly draws his sword and aggressively orders Vim to step away from his sister. Daniel angrily glares at the cheerful sorcerer while explaining he rushed back because he was incredibly worried. Daniel proudly claims he was right to return while Vim complains about him ruining the romantic mood. Vim playfully whines that Daniel is incredibly cruel for actively sabotaging his best friend's desperate love life. The sorcerer announces he is leaving for work but eagerly promises to visit her again very soon. Daniel watches the eccentric mage depart while sighing about how quickly free-spirited people always run away. Charlotte nervously reflects that the highly unpredictable sorcerer is truly someone she can never let her guard down around. Daniel gently interrupts her swirling thoughts and suggests they finally return to the safety of the mansion. She realizes that her accumulated noble social experience is completely useless against such a fiercely unpredictable man. She acknowledges that he always completely bypasses her careful countermeasures with his surprisingly direct romantic approaches. She softly admits to herself that she will probably spend tonight thinking about the charming sorcerer again. She realizes with a sigh that her entire day has been completely consumed by thoughts of him. Two cheerful maids happily gossip about how Lady Charlotte's beautiful smile finally returned after Vim started visiting. The excited servants eagerly agree to prepare the finest new tea leaves for his next wonderful visit. Charlotte fondly remembers how his interesting conversations and highly thoughtful gifts genuinely filled her with immense happiness. She curiously wonders how she would have spent these recent days if the sorcerer had never arrived. She recalls the crippling frustration and dark powerlessness that previously made her feel so incredibly cold inside. She happily realizes she is now far too busy spending time with Vim to ever feel depressed. Daniel suddenly breaks the peaceful silence by stating he has something extremely important to discuss with her. Charlotte kindly assures her serious brother that she is completely willing to listen to whatever he needs. She sits quietly and looks at him with gentle anticipation as he prepares his heavy emotional thoughts. She softly expresses her deep gratitude and quietly waits for him to finally reveal his secret burden. Daniel sweats nervously and looks deeply disturbed as he hesitates right before revealing a shocking hidden truth. The terrified girl gasps heavily for air while desperately begging someone to stop the turning gears. Reaching out in pure panic, the desperate young man violently screams for someone to help them. Coughing up dark blood, the fragile girl collapses helplessly against the cold floor in sheer agony. Panting heavily in immense pain, she desperately thinks she cannot bear to repeat this cruel nightmare. A meager plate of hard bread rests quietly on the cold floor of her bleak cell. A sudden horrifying realization strikes her as she violently realizes the prison bread is deeply poisoned. Dark blood viciously spills from her trembling lips as the lethal poison swiftly ravages her body. Clutching her chest in unbearable agony, the dying girl tearfully screams her absolute hatred for everything. Charlotte jolts violently awake while loudly gasping for precious air after experiencing that deeply traumatic nightmare. Sweating heavily, she forces herself to switch gears after enduring the exact same horrific death dream. Gazing quietly out her grand bedroom window, Charlotte desperately tries to clear her deeply haunted mind. She solemnly reminds herself that today is an incredibly important day demanding her complete and utter focus. Clutching her nightgown tightly, she fiercely vows to quickly forget those dark memories of past deaths. The incredibly charming Sorcerer Vim greets her warmly while cheerfully noting that 2 days have passed. Vim suddenly pauses with a deeply confused expression as he curiously examines her surprisingly formal attire. Charlotte stands nervously before the towering sorcerer wearing a beautiful dress instead of casual tea clothes. Looking slightly disappointed, Vim gently asks her if they are skipping their usual afternoon tea party. Charlotte politely apologizes for summoning him early and nervously asks if he will accompany her somewhere. Vim beams with intense joy and excitedly realizes that this unexpected outing is actually a date. The ecstatic sorcerer playfully boasts that his lovely maids eagerly helped him dress up perfectly today. Taking her delicate hand gently, Vim confidently offers to seamlessly teleport them anywhere she vividly imagines. Charlotte stares up at the handsome sorcerer with a deeply serious and thoroughly unwavering romantic determination. Closing her beautiful eyes, she strongly visualizes the specific destination while the confident mage executes teleportation. A brilliant flash of powerful magic flawlessly transports the young couple through space to their chosen location. Vim leans in closely and whispers softly that she can finally open her beautiful eyes now. Charlotte blinks in genuine surprise as she realizes his powerful teleportation magic brought them exactly here. Looking around the luxurious room, she quietly marvels at how truly amazing his transportation magic is. Charlotte confidently turns her attention toward the highly respectful shop workers silently waiting for her arrival. The elegant head tailor warmly welcomes Lady Charlotte with a deep bow of profound professional respect. Charlotte formally acknowledges the traditional tailor shop frequently utilized by her prestigious Edelstein family for generations. She feels deeply relieved that she smartly informed the staff beforehand about their highly unusual arrival. A thoroughly confused Vim wonders aloud if he should carry shopping bags while asking about clothes. Charlotte sincerely offers to buy him a luxurious new robe as heartfelt gratitude for continuously saving her. She honestly admits that his endless generosity deeply overwhelms her and demands a proper magical repayment. Her fiercely protective brother Daniel suddenly remembers a crucial detail regarding the legendary sorcerer's magical wardrobe. Charlotte passionately expresses her strong desire to finally give something meaningful back to the wonderful sorcerer. Daniel trembles violently while processing a massive shocking revelation about the incredibly powerful dark sorcerer's clothes. Charlotte looks at her distressed brother with genuine concern as he struggles to utter the truth. Daniel dramatically reveals that he actually gifted Vim that specific dark robe 5 long years ago. Charlotte thoughtfully processes the shocking fact that the terrifying Demon King diligently wears her brother's gift. Daniel sharply points out that the greatest magician always wearing the exact same robe is incredibly odd. Charlotte thoughtfully suggests giving Vim something else since he deeply treasures his sentimental connection with Daniel. Daniel flatly rejects this idea while claiming Vim will probably wear the old robe forever otherwise. Daniel reluctantly admits his sheer hesitation about his friend losing dignity over a gift from Charlotte. Vim suddenly appears and happily declares he will gladly wear a brand new robe from Charlotte. The elegant madam happily announces she has prepared several highly recommended fabrics for the new robe. A delicate hand gently brushes against the incredibly smooth and luxurious material of the dark fabric. Charlotte warmly observes that any of the available options will undoubtedly make a truly magnificent robe. The powerful sorcerer looks deeply pensive while staring silently at the wide array of fabric choices. Vim honestly admits that he actually never cared much about his own clothing or personal fashion. The legendary mage bashfully confesses that he genuinely does not know what colors truly suit him. Vim humbly asks Charlotte for her precious advice regarding the deeply symbolic choice of a magician's robe. Charlotte fondly remembers his constant help and earnestly desires to assist the powerful sorcerer in return. Charlotte firmly vows to do her absolute best to perfectly fulfill Lord Vim's deeply important wishes. Vim playfully teases her romantic wording while eagerly accepting her generous proposal to grant his wishes. Charlotte completely ignores his playful teasing and coldly orders him to choose a fabric color immediately. The madam notes that avoiding warm colors perfectly complements the legendary sorcerer's striking hair and eyes. Charlotte carefully considers selecting a dark black fabric since his previous favorite robe was also black. She thoughtfully suggests black because it will beautifully highlight his completely unique hair and eye colors. Vim enthusiastically agrees with her brilliant suggestion while Charlotte wonders if her brother thought similarly before. Vim softly smiles and admits that he actually genuinely likes the familiar and comforting black color. Charlotte carefully explains that the two distinct types of black fabric differ significantly in their glossiness. She practically asks Vim whether he usually appears in front of people more during daytime hours. Vim cheerfully explains that he completely avoids night work because he strongly prefers sleeping well instead. Charlotte logically advises choosing a highly subdued shine to maintain perfect elegance during his daytime duties. Vim stares intently at her while carefully absorbing her highly practical and incredibly thoughtful fashion advice. The powerful sorcerer warmly smiles and completely trusts her impeccable recommendation without a single second thought. Charlotte blushes slightly while turning her gaze downward after receiving his completely unquestioning and absolute trust. Charlotte quickly shifts focus and firmly declares that only the basic design and decorations eagerly remain. Vim firmly requests the design samples from the madam while playfully asking for some poured wine. A large intricate catalogue gracefully displays an array of beautiful designs and ornate buttons for selection. Charlotte thoughtfully considers Vim's incredibly striking appearance and logically concludes that excessive decorations are completely unnecessary. She politely asks permission to determine the final design based heavily on his preferred simple decorations. Vim readily agrees with a warm smile while placing his complete trust in her stylistic judgment. The charming couple sits closely together on a plush sofa while carefully studying the design book. Charlotte quietly asks him to wait a single moment while she checks the precise delivery date. Charlotte deeply wonders if her chosen design is truly worthy of the continent's absolutely greatest magician. Vim softly remarks with a tender gaze that waiting for this beautiful robe will feel agonizingly long. Vim joyfully explains that any precious item given by someone so completely dear is incredibly special. Vim sincerely declares it his most valuable possession ever while Charlotte dismisses his sweet romantic exaggeration. Charlotte humbly notes that Lord Vim has surely received much more expensive gifts in his past. Vim calmly gazes sideways while immediately agreeing with her utterly factual statement about his wealth. He dismissively explains that expensive jewels and paintings are merely meaningless luxury items to him. His sharp eye narrows as he cynically recalls nobles giving gifts solely to demand favors. Flashing a mockingly arrogant smile, he brutally claims their ulterior motives remain completely and pathetically obvious. Charlotte stares silently in slight surprise while absorbing his dark perspective on high society manipulation. His expression softens immensely while tenderly declaring that her thoughtful robe is entirely genuinely different. Looking at her deeply, he warmly professes immense happiness because she seriously thought about him. The powerful sorcerer confidently declares her specific gift holds greater absolute value than rare gemstones. Charlotte blushes furiously while mentally dismissing his incredibly romantic words as sheer playful magical exaggeration. She feels deeply relieved that she boldly invited him instead of choosing a generic design. A beautiful warm smile graces her face as she discovers the profound joy of gifting. Charlotte curiously wonders if the newly ordered black robe can truly be finished in 3 days. The elegant madam warmly promises her absolute best effort for the eagerly anticipating young lady. Charlotte respectfully entrusts the important task to the highly skilled and greatly trusted boutique owner. The professional tailor eagerly anticipates their specific return in exactly 3 highly exciting short days. Charlotte politely hands back the large design catalogue while graciously expressing her deep sincere gratitude. The boutique owner eagerly presents completely new dress designs and enthusiastically invites Charlotte for fitting. Charlotte looks incredibly surprised as the helpful woman kindly offers magical adjustments for any dress. She silently acknowledges the highly famous creator who always stays brilliantly ahead of fashion trends. A dark shadow falls over her face as she bitterly remembers her absolute social unsuitability. Vim completely shatters her dark thoughts by cheerfully pointing out a beautiful dress for her. The tailor immediately agrees with Vim while enthusiastically praising Charlotte for possessing immense mature beauty. Both Vim and the eccentric madam beam with intense joyous excitement at the brilliant prospect. Charlotte stands completely frozen in utterly confused silence as bright magical sparkles surround her form. Reluctantly yielding to their immense combined enthusiasm, she finally agrees to try a single dress. An overly excited Vim immediately commands the eager tailor to fetch matching shiny jewelry accessories. The powerful sorcerer deeply analyzes the glittering jewels while loudly complaining about the difficult choice. He glares intensely at the dazzling accessories with a surprisingly fierce and completely serious expression. Charlotte stares back at his intense face, feeling an overwhelming wave of nervous romantic tension. Blushing deeply, she softly murmurs that he really does not have to act so seriously. Deciding to completely surrender, she gracefully follows the polite boutique assistant toward the fitting room. Standing quietly before a massive elegant mirror, Charlotte allows the skilled maids to dress her. The talented madam gently brushes Charlotte's long black hair while arranging the final delicate touches. The boutique owner warmly declares the amazing transformation completely finished while sincerely praising her beauty. Charlotte softly whispers her heartfelt thanks as the ecstatic madam happily clasps her hands together. She nervously hopes she can properly wear this exquisite dress without ruining the wonderful gift. She fiercely denies wanting any direct praise while deeply worrying about damaging Vim's fragile confidence. Stepping out shyly, she politely apologizes for making the patiently waiting legendary sorcerer wait outside. Charlotte stands beautifully adorned in a magnificently detailed elegant dress, completely capturing his breathless attention. Looking up with a deeply flushed and nervous face, she softly asks how she looks. She gently turns her delicate shoulder toward the completely silent and intensely staring powerful sorcerer. Vim remains completely speechless with visibly sparkling eyes as Charlotte nervously calls his formal name. Charlotte stands silently in an incredibly beautiful striped dress while waiting for Vim to finally react. Vim stares blankly at her while internally panicking because he has never experienced this intense feeling before. A profound sense of sheer awe completely overwhelms him as he silently compares her to an angel. He struggles to properly process the breathtaking sight while wondering if she truly is a divine being. Misinterpreting his complete silence, Charlotte nervously clutches her beautiful dress while wondering if the outfit looks terrible. Feeling deeply self-conscious, the anxious young lady hesitantly calls out the legendary sorcerer's name in quiet confusion. Startled by her gentle voice, the flustered mage violently steps back while loudly blurting a sudden apology. His dark boots hastily shuffle backward against the floor as he desperately tries to regain his composure. The powerful sorcerer and the beautiful noblewoman stand awkwardly apart in the middle of the elegant boutique. Covering his heavily blushing face, Vim passionately confesses that he simply cannot take his eyes off her. Blushing furiously, the mighty Demon King softly admits he initially thought this breathtaking vision was merely a dream. Charlotte nervously insists he does not have to force himself to offer such incredibly high romantic praise. Vim earnestly counters that her overwhelming beauty is actually a massive problem he never knew existed before. Staring deeply into her eyes, he gently assures her that she remains as wonderfully spectacular as always. He praises his own excellent gut feeling while confidently declaring that the lovely dress perfectly suits her. Touching his chin thoughtfully, the legendary mage realizes a profound truth about heavily gifting clothes to fiancés. He finally completely understands Daniel's relentless habit of thoroughly showering his own beloved fiancée with endless dresses. Vim openly acknowledges that generously gifting expensive dresses is a brilliant noble strategy to perfectly repel unwanted suitors. Reaching his large hand out gently, the powerful sorcerer softly declares that his true intention goes much deeper. Charlotte stares back at him with wide and thoroughly confused eyes while eagerly waiting for his full explanation. Gently touching her delicate frills, he proudly announces that he strongly desires to mark her as exclusively his. Leaning in dangerously close, Vim romantically declares an overwhelming sense of sheer superiority because she belongs to him. He gleefully relishes the intensely satisfying fact that his beloved Charlotte is entirely wearing clothes he personally chose. Gazing affectionately into her eyes, he passionately swears he wants to keep looking at this breathtaking sight forever. Charlotte shrieks loudly while furiously covering her brightly burning red face in an absolute state of sheer panic. Vim openly teases her heavily blushing face while warmly calling her incredibly cute in this highly flustered state. He affectionately praises both her elegant composure and her wonderfully adorable flustered reactions while staring intently at her. Her heart pounds violently in her chest while she desperately tries to handle her incredibly embarrassing romantic situation. Turning back to the large mirror, Charlotte furiously attempts to properly calm her wildly racing anxious heart. Her cheeks burn with intense heat as she struggles to logically process the legendary sorcerer's overwhelming romantic assault. She completely panics internally while fully realizing this highly dangerous romantic pace is entirely destroying her calm facade. The highly concerned boutique owner gently approaches the trembling young lady while softly calling out her formal title. Still blushing deeply, Charlotte quietly lowers her gaze while awkwardly trying to hide her incredibly massive internal embarrassment. Desperately needing a quick escape, the flustered noblewoman urgently requests the helpful tailor to help her change immediately. While carefully removing the lovely garments, the elegant madam curiously asks for her honest opinion on the dress. Charlotte quietly reflects on the incredibly intense romantic moments she just wildly experienced with the charming dark sorcerer. Staring into Vim's eyes, Charlotte softly admits she will always remember today if she buys this specific dress. Gently brushing the noblewoman's dark hair, the wise madam warmly reminds her they originally came for a robe. Charlotte politely agrees while earnestly thanking the talented tailor and excitedly anticipating the wonderful completion of Vim's robe. The highly skilled boutique owner bows respectfully while warmly inviting the beautiful young lady to visit again anytime. Vim apologizes for keeping Charlotte waiting, noting he wasn't waiting long and she passed on the dress. Vim suddenly asks the surprised young woman if it would be okay if he gifted the dress. Charlotte asks for forgiveness while explaining that a dress is a gift only a fiancé can give. Vim gracefully accepts the strict noble rule and casually suggests they just head back home for now. The quiet scene smoothly transitions to a beautifully lush and brightly sunlit greenhouse filled with tall plants. Charlotte's stylish black-laced boots step elegantly onto the polished floor of the massive glass greenhouse. Charlotte secretly wonders if he suddenly wishes to have a quiet tea party in their beautiful greenhouse. She silently notes they were originally heading home today but suddenly stopped in this strange place instead. Looking up with a deeply curious expression, Charlotte softly calls out Lord Vim's formal name in confusion. Vim gently offers her an alternative gift since he could not formally give her the beautiful dress. He presents a magical summoning tool, causing Charlotte to completely wonder what this strange item actually is. He explains she might need him unexpectedly because his frequent magical teleportation makes normal contact incredibly difficult. Charlotte listens quietly while silently noting there hasn't been a major problem at the current moment yet. He highly assures her this magical tool lets her summon and consult him freely whenever unexpected emergencies arise. A tiny magical spark gleams brilliantly against the deep dark background as he reveals the special item. A delicate silver chain dangles freely as Charlotte curiously questions exactly why he chose a specific bracelet. Staring tenderly into her eyes, Vim softly explains he genuinely wants her wearing it like a protective charm. He confesses working with craftsmen heavily delayed the gift, hoping it wouldn't obstruct her completely daily life. Charlotte blushes deeply while admiring the beautiful platinum chain and tiny topaz flowers Vim personally thoughtfully chose. The highly powerful sorcerer continuously observes her reaction closely while quietly contemplating if she actually likes it. Charlotte sincerely thanks him and firmly promises to deeply cherish and wear the lovely bracelet with care. Vim watches her intently with a serious and deeply emotional expression, heavily reflecting his profound romantic affection. Smiling warmly, he enthusiastically thanks her for accepting it and swears he will fly absolutely anywhere she calls. Gently pressing his large hand against his face, he solemnly promises to absolutely always protect her unconditionally. Charlotte's incredibly beautiful wide eye perfectly reflects her intense emotional shock at his completely sincere romantic vow. A highly delicate hand gracefully reaches out toward another as tiny magical sparkles float peacefully around them. The incredibly legendary sorcerer smiles with overwhelming gentleness as pure romantic affection radiates clearly from his face. Charlotte safely stands silently in the brightly lit greenhouse while staring thoughtfully out the massively large window. She nervously wonders if the incredibly charming dark mage has actually started to like her today. Clutching her chest with deep relief, she feels incredibly glad he didn't directly ask about her feelings. Looking down at the glittering topaz bracelet, she nervously wonders exactly how long that magical promise lasts. Meanwhile, a heavily armored guard carrying a bright glowing lantern slowly patrols a dark stone corridor tonight. The patrolling guard suddenly stops upon encountering another incredibly silent, rigid soldier standing strictly at absolute attention. A massively large iron door looms ominously before them, being clearly marked with the distinct imposing number 6. Inside the remarkably bleak underground cell, a completely ragged prisoner sits quietly on his cot while reading. The guards casually discuss how the crazy prisoner wants to completely relearn absolutely everything from the beginning. A strict guard mockingly notes that the completely disgraced prince has finally shown some highly pathetic remorse. Prince Alois heavily sweats and violently gasps quietly in the shadows while enduring his incredibly harsh dark imprisonment. Staring obsessively at his heavy book with intensely crazed eyes, the imprisoned prince desperately whispers Charlotte's name. Meanwhile, a remarkably handsome dark-haired man relaxing on a beautiful balcony smirks confidently while drinking fine wine. The legendary sorcerer Vim ecstatically shows off the newly completed robe he received from Charlotte. Wearing his magnificent new dark robe, Vim stands proudly while a seated Daniel silently observes him. Daniel critically points out that waking Charlotte up just to show the robe would be incredibly cruel. Vim casually explains his work ran late before apologizing for barging in so suddenly tonight. The ecstatic sorcerer passionately admits he simply could not contain his overflowing joy all by himself. Annoyed by the intrusion, Daniel sharply demands his best friend to show a bit more consideration. Rich dark wine pours smoothly into an elegant crystal glass resting quietly on the small table. The powerful mage silently accepts the offered wine glass with a surprisingly solemn and thoughtful expression. The two handsome men relax together comfortably while quietly enjoying their fine wine in the night. Staring ahead thoughtfully, Daniel suddenly breaks the peaceful silence by sincerely thanking the legendary Dark Sorcerer. He honestly admits that giving the protective cloak as a gift was entirely his sister's original idea. He fondly notes that despite his advice, Charlotte remains an incredibly serious and genuinely kind person. Vim warmly agrees while confessing that knowing her true selfless nature makes him like her even more. The incredibly powerful Demon King smiles softly while gazing thoughtfully at his dark shimmering wine glass. He bitterly recalls how most arrogant nobles treat him superficially due to his lowly commoner origins. The Dark Sorcerer cynically explains that wealthy aristocrats constantly try to fiercely control powerful magicians however they please. He notes they maliciously mock magicians behind their backs or throw childish tantrums when strictly refused. Vim thoughtfully reflects on this toxic aristocratic behavior while silently wondering if Daniel was a rare exception. Taking a sip of wine, he grimly states that those nobles still treat him less than human. A profoundly gentle smile graces his lips as he softly declares that sweet Charlotte was entirely different. He passionately explains that the beautiful young lady completely shattered his dark expectations of typical noble behavior. The mighty sorcerer warmly recalls how she boldly refused to flatter him or fear his terrifying title. He firmly declares that the earnest young woman always respectfully saw him as a true absolute equal. An annoyed Daniel sharply interrupts by proudly declaring that his wonderful sister is obviously incredibly special. The protective brother smugly notes how his adorable sister desperately tries hiding her flustered reactions around Vim. Gently touching his silver pendant, Vim nervously admits he desperately wants to show off his cool side. The completely smitten mage honestly confesses his intense romantic feelings for her keep growing dangerously stronger every day. Hearing this profound romantic confession, the incredibly protective brother stares back with a deadly serious expression. An intimidatingly dark aura furiously surrounds Daniel as he glares intensely at the slightly sweating legendary mage. Attempting to casually break the heavy tension, Vim nervously asks if Daniel still fiercely hates his proposal. The devoted brother coldly declares he cannot accept any situation potentially causing his precious sister future unhappiness. Vim sincerely insists he is entirely serious while practically begging his best friend for a little trust. Daniel logically acknowledges Vim possesses immense wealth and powerful titles, ensuring Charlotte a thoroughly completely comfortable life. However, he sharply counters that sheer material wealth is utterly meaningless since Prince Alois easily provided those. Looking slightly downwards, the sad brother bitterly notes that his precious sister never seemed genuinely completely happy. Vim listens intently as Daniel wisely explains that desperately showering someone with expensive gifts never guarantees true happiness. Staring intensely, Daniel aggressively challenges the great sorcerer to accomplish what the powerful royal family completely failed. The fiercely protective brother implicitly warns him to completely back off without absolute confidence in her happiness. Vim angrily rejects the unfair comparison while passionately vowing to absolutely sacrifice everything for her true happiness. Daniel immediately questions his utter sincerity by pointing out his incredibly casual and seemingly frivolous romantic flirting. The cautious brother warns that overwhelming her now might forcefully trap her into an unhappy obligated engagement. Vim defensively argues that this cautious patience is precisely why he is currently waiting for her genuine readiness. The fiercely determined sorcerer vehemently refuses to give up while swearing to patiently heal her deeply traumatized heart. The deeply conflicted older brother thoughtfully rubs his chin while carefully weighing the immensely powerful sorcerer's passionate words. A sudden dark memory sharply pierces Daniel's mind, causing him to violently recall a highly suspicious past event. Pinching the bridge of his nose, the exhausted noble finally relents and strongly warns Vim against disappointing him. A wonderfully bright and immensely confident smile fully illuminates the handsome legendary sorcerer's face as he readily agrees. Daniel bitterly admits utter bewilderment regarding why the prince ruthlessly betrayed a completely loyal lifelong childhood friend. The legendary sorcerer's eyes widen in sheer utter confusion as he sharply questions Daniel about this startling revelation. Daniel aggressively questions the stunned sorcerer, asking how he possibly entirely missed the blatantly obvious signs of severe mistreatment. The frustrated noble explains that Prince Alois completely discarded Charlotte simply because he dangerously obsessed over another woman. Daniel reveals the exceptionally cunning prince meticulously fabricated airtight false evidence to completely permanently secure his own royal position. Vim mentally calculates that a fiercely cautious mastermind simply would not risk publicly framing an innocent high-ranking fiancé. The highly intelligent mage strongly suspects the cold prince deliberately lied about completely continuously ignoring the poor girl. He rationally concludes that loudly publicly threatening a powerful duke's daughter with dark underground imprisonment was incredibly suicidally reckless. Recalling her bleak, terrifying descriptions of the dark dungeon, Vim realizes she absolutely possessed genuine traumatic first-hand experience. A deeply disturbing dark premonition violently grips his heart as he solidly remembers his familiar confirming her absolute innocence. He horrifyingly recalls a deeply traumatized Charlotte violently trembling and hysterically sobbing while refusing to remember the dark interrogation. A metaphorical, incredibly sharp glass pane violently shatters inside his brilliant mind as a horrifying dark truth finally clicks. The suddenly deeply serious sorcerer aggressively announces his immediate departure, claiming he has highly urgent, terrifying business tonight. He strictly commands the thoroughly confused Daniel to personally heavily prepare the drinks for their very next important meeting. His magnificent dark customized robe fiercely flutters behind him as the legendary magical Demon King storms violently away. Meanwhile, an incredibly terrified Charlotte violently gasps for precious air while suffering another desperately horribly agonizing dark nightmare alone. Charlotte gasps softly while staring out of a dark barred window into the bleak night. She stares blankly while utterly denying the horrifying and completely impossible reality unfolding before her. Her wide trembling eye conveys sheer terror as a dark realization violently strikes her mind. She desperately questions aloud why she is tragically imprisoned inside the dreaded sixth cell again. Violently pulling at her heavy chains, she screams that this brutal nightmare absolutely cannot be happening. Cold water splashes against her bare shackled feet as she softly hiccups in pure despair. Collapsing heavily onto the hard stone floor, she lets out an agonizingly painful, desperate scream. She desperately wonders why this dark tragedy keeps happening while gasping heavily for precious air. Crying out desperately, she frantically begs for absolutely anyone to rescue her immediately from hell. She sits completely alone in the massively dark cell, safely behind extremely heavy iron bars. Trembling violently, she lets out a startled gasp as sheer panic fully consumes her mind. She desperately tries convincing herself this must be another terrible dream since she completely avoided condemnation. She tearfully wonders if her recent beautiful salvation was merely a cruel illusion born from desperation. Hot tears stream down her face as she horribly realizes she might violently die from poison again. Lying helplessly, she strongly resolves to completely refuse all food and drink to avoid lethal poison. She tightly grips the cold iron bars while agonizingly admitting she cannot simply resist terrible starvation forever. Staring hopelessly at the heavy locked wooden door, she softly whispers a deeply tragic romantic denial. She utterly breaks down while desperately wondering exactly how many times she must blindly repeat this nightmare. A sudden, surprisingly loud noise violently pierces the dark, terrifying silence, causing her to abruptly freeze. Her eyes violently widen in sheer absolute shock as a miraculous realization suddenly aggressively hits her. She clearly remembers Lord Vim deeply promising to fly to her whenever she desperately calls him. His profound romantic vow to completely unconditionally protect her violently echoes through her intensely frightened mind. Desperately grasping her precious magic bracelet, she intensely begs Lord Vim to kindly save her immediately. Sobbing uncontrollably, she violently clutches her trembling chest while intensely begging to be magically taken away immediately. Pressing desperately against the cold, thick iron, she tearfully repeatedly whispers her powerful magical romantic plea. A deeply familiar masculine voice suddenly urgently calls out her beautiful name, causing her immense startled confusion. She looks around the completely empty dungeon, frantically wondering exactly where the echoing magical voice originated. Crying out her sheer terror, she suddenly clearly hears him reassuringly magically declare he is right there. A brilliant magical portal furiously tears open right before her as Lord Vim urgently magically reaches out. She violently jolts awake from her incredibly terrible nightmare while heavily gasping for precious vital air. Lying completely safely inside her luxurious bedroom, she slowly realizes the remarkably legendary sorcerer is watching over her. The highly concerned dark mage gently notes her heavy nightmare while she groggily loudly murmurs his formal name. He tenderly reaches out to softly gracefully caress her intensely sweating cheek with a deeply affectionate touch. The incredibly legendary dark sorcerer softly closes his eyes while instantly flashing an incredibly warm, highly comforting smile. Charlotte heavily stares blankly upwards at him while a surprisingly furious heavy blush slowly completely paints her cheeks. Still completely totally bewildered, she gently successfully reaches her delicate pale hand out to touch his beautiful robe. She deeply happily fully realizes the magnificent dark robe she specially ordered wonderfully perfectly fits the legendary sorcerer. He eagerly enthusiastically thanks beautiful Charlotte while happily loudly pointing out that he successfully safely received his comfortable robe. Charlotte violently surprisingly shoots straight upwards in bed while intensely staring at him in absolutely complete utter bewilderment. She heavily loudly pants in completely absolute confusion while the entirely totally oblivious handsome sorcerer continues smiling extremely brightly. Charlotte immediately apologizes for summoning him so late at night while clutching her blankets in distress. She explains calling him solely because of a terrifying nightmare that completely shook her heart tonight. She notes he usually prefers sleeping soundly instead of dealing with her sudden middle-of-the-night calls. Trembling slightly, she sincerely asks how she can properly apologize or ever make this trouble up to him. Vim considers himself extremely lucky because he got to see her sleeping face and the precious bracelet. Charlotte thinks to herself that he is acting exactly the same as always despite the unusual hour. She worries about exposing her defenseless appearance if the powerful sorcerer suddenly decides to touch her. The handsome legendary mage flashes a remarkably gentle and highly affectionate smile while watching her carefully. The heavy tension in the room begins to slowly dissipate as the two spend a quiet moment together. Charlotte notices that he is already wearing the magnificent dark robe she recently gave him as a gift. Vim smoothly suggests going outside for a brief walk to clear their minds of any lingering dark thoughts. He casually summons the high-ranking demon alphas who immediately treats the terrifying creature like a pet dog. Charlotte lets out a startled gasp as the powerful sorcerer suddenly lifts her up for a magical journey. They travel through the night air while the cool breeze brushes against her cheeks during their sudden outing. He holds her incredibly close to his chest while they float gracefully above the sleeping city below. A breathtaking and shimmering view of the entire royal capital at night unfolds beautifully beneath them. Gazing down at the sparkling lights, Charlotte curiously asks if that magnificent sight is truly the royal capital. Vim confirms the location while asking her if she finds the glowing city view to be truly beautiful. He tells her to wear the robe properly so she does not catch a cold in the night. Charlotte watches him with a deeply touched expression as she realizes how much he truly cares for her. She wonders if this very moment is merely a beautiful illusion born from her own desperate inner desires. They stand together in the quiet night while the stars shine brilliantly over the dark mountain silhouette. Vim gently asks her what kind of terrifying dream she was having before calling for his help. Lowering her gaze, Charlotte hesitates for a moment before deciding to finally reveal her recurring nightmare. He suggests letting alphas eat any fears born from her dreams because they are just a snack. The high-ranking demon wolf excitedly wags its tail while loudly declaring its desire to eat more snacks. Charlotte looks down sadly while the weight of her repetitive past lives continues to haunt her mind. She explains the dream where she cannot prove her innocence and the sorcerer never appears to save her. She describes the vivid feeling of being imprisoned over and over again despite not actually being captured yet. Looking into the distance, she notes that in those dreams Lord Vim must surely be running late. Her eyes fill with a profound sadness as she reflects on the recurring pain of her past deaths. Vim softly acknowledges her words and realizes that is exactly why she was desperately seeking his help. He gently asks her if she has been suffering from these vivid and painful dreams for a long time. The sorcerer admits he cannot use magic to stop nightmares but offers another way to help her. He explains he can stop the nightmare halfway by waking her up whenever she calls for his protection. He reaches out and takes her hand while noting that she is still wearing his special magic bracelet. Vim promises to stay with her until she finally calms down and feels completely safe again. Charlotte blushes intensely while staring up at him with a mixture of pure surprise and growing romantic affection. She shyly murmurs that she simply cannot trouble him that much after everything he has already done. Vim smiles and asks her to let him protect her even if the danger is only a dream. Vim earnestly asks Charlotte if she is really sure about this while solemnly promising to protect her. Charlotte politely replies he is always welcome but notes she might call him much later tonight. Vim gently suggests another way if calling him makes her feel overly guilty about bothering him. Charlotte looks at him intently and earnestly asks the powerful sorcerer to please tell her immediately. He suggests she use the magical communication item right before she sleeps every single night instead. He cheerfully explains that doing so allows him to watch over her the entire time she sleeps. He passionately promises to stay by her side so she can safely rely on him anytime. He eagerly asks if it is a good idea while she stammers nervously about being near him. Charlotte flatly rejects his outrageous co-sleeping idea while the sorcerer playfully whines about his great plan. She sighs deeply and strictly reprimands the legendary mage for constantly joking around way too much. As they overlook the glowing city, she realizes that just talking to Vim eases her chest pain. She thinks it is strange because she never actually felt uncomfortable when he mentioned sleeping together. Charlotte softly realizes she has completely come to rely on the charming sorcerer without even knowing it. Vim gently asks if they should return to her room before anyone notices she snuck out tonight. He politely extends his large hand toward her while she shyly agrees to head back home. The grand wooden doors of her luxurious bedroom stand quietly in the silent darkness of the night. Charlotte sincerely thanks him for tonight while brightly declaring it was a very wonderful romantic outing. She panics internally while wondering what kind of quack doctor sneaks a lady out at night. Blushing furiously, she realizes she kept his robe and feels incredibly embarrassed about the whole situation. She tells the worried sorcerer she will be fine and playfully accuses him of overly worrying. Charlotte graciously thanks the massive wolf demon Alphas for generously lending her his broad back tonight. The terrifying demon wolf happily asks if he can stay in her room until morning as a reward. Vim easily agrees to the bizarre request as long as sweet Charlotte is completely okay with it. Charlotte gladly accepts the proposal while noting she cannot guarantee she will have any more dark nightmares. The giant wolf excitedly licks its chops while wildly craving the absolutely delicious fear from her nightmares. Charlotte smiles gently at the large terrifying beast and happily agrees to his highly unusual midnight request. She gazes warmly at the legendary sorcerer with deeply grateful and highly affectionate beautiful soft eyes. Vim playfully complains about the wolf getting special permission while Charlotte affectionately pets the beast's large head. Vim warmly wishes Charlotte a good night and strictly commands his powerful familiar to be a good boy. The incredibly handsome sorcerer flashes a dazzling smile while sincerely praying she has a very good sleep. Charlotte quietly reflects that she completely misjudged him as a superficial flirt who merely used innocent women. Tucked safely into her soft bed, she peacefully concludes that Lord Vim is actually a pure-hearted person. She curiously asks the resting wolf demon if he has known the legendary sorcerer for a long time. Alphas happily explains he gladly answers his summons because Vim's powerful magic tastes truly and incredibly exquisite. Charlotte looks slightly surprised and quietly repeats the wolf's strange description of a highly sweet magical scent. The demon elaborates that even ugly humans taste extremely delicious when they get very close to Vim. He proudly suggests Vim earned the terrifying Demon King title simply because he faithfully follows the sorcerer. Alphas thoroughly explains that cunning humans with filthy desires and hidden greed produce a highly delicious dark taste. The great wolf warmly reassures a startled Charlotte that she is completely different and shouldn't worry at all. She sadly acknowledges she relies on his immense kindness but cannot properly return his deep romantic feelings. The demon wolf chuckles darkly while confidently boasting he can easily see the true hidden emotions people hold. He sharply warns her that even if she perfectly hides her feelings, the emotions produced remain completely delicious. The wolf deduces her nightmare reflects real experiences because pure fear stripped of deception has a unique flavor. Charlotte completely freezes in sheer absolute horror as the terrifying demon carelessly exposes her most closely guarded secret. The terrifying wolf casually mentions she was imprisoned 4 times since repeating it matured her fear quite nicely. He sharply asks if she ever thoroughly looked into the dark past where she was brutally and repeatedly imprisoned. Alphas ominously chuckles while admitting he cannot actually use reverse magic himself despite being a powerful high-ranking demon. Charlotte trembles violently in absolute sheer shock as she desperately processes the terrifying mention of powerful reverse magic. The demon ominously explains that using such incredibly advanced magic always requires a profoundly massive and special fee. Charlotte horrifyingly wonders if her constantly repeating tragic life is entirely because Lord Vim forcefully used reverse magic. The terrifying demon coldly interrupts her swirling dark thoughts by directly asking what exactly she is desperately seeking. He brutally reveals the absolute dark choice requires sacrificing either massive magical power or incredibly precious remaining lifespan. Alphas cruelly calculates that since she lacks magic it would brutally cost her roughly 40 years of lifespan. He sadistically taunts her by sharply asking what she will actually choose since the terrifying price is too great. Relieved that she immediately backed down, the loyal demon states Vim would absolutely hate him if she got hurt. The giant wolf smoothly changes the heavy dark subject and actively urges her to comfortably sleep before morning arrives. Charlotte lies completely frozen in her bed while staring blankly ahead in a profound state of sheer terrified shock. Alphas softly apologizes for deeply troubling her while noting her absolute inability to sleep will severely decrease any nightmares. The massive demon wolf calmly declares he will personally provide a special protective service since she is completely awake. He widely opens his terrifying dark mouth as an incredibly intense dark magical aura furiously gathers completely around him. The massive familiar stares intensely at the fiercely trembling girl while completely filling the beautiful bedroom with overwhelming dark energy. A highly terrifying close-up heavily highlights the massive wolf's extremely sharp fangs gleaming menacingly in the pitch-black dark shadows. Using his overwhelmingly dark sleep magic, the powerful demon gently forces her into a completely deep slumber while bidding goodnight. Charlotte approaches the beautiful gazebo while quietly reflecting on the terrifying events of her past lives. She realizes the terrifying demon Alpha knew about her past imprisonments and her 4 tragic deaths. Despite acknowledging her absolute inability to wield time reversal magic, she still hopelessly wonders about it. She firmly concludes that time reversal remains highly advanced magic, completely impossible even for high demons. Staring intensely at the powerful sorcerer, she silently questions who could possibly wield such immense magic. She logically assumes Lord Vim desperately rewound time to repeatedly fix something incredibly difficult to resolve. She sadly wonders if his deepest desperate wish remained unfulfilled despite continuously realizing the repeating world. A sudden startling thought violently shatters her dark contemplation as she gasps quietly in sheer surprise. The legendary sorcerer casually greets her with a warm smile while carrying a small paper bag. The incredibly handsome dark sorcerer stands gracefully while gently holding his mysterious little paper package securely. Charlotte violently flinches in absolute surprise at his highly sudden and completely unexpected magical daily appearance. Recovering quickly, she warmly welcomes the legendary dark mage with a surprisingly gentle and soft smile. He cheerfully announces bringing wonderful rose jam specially made by Adela to perfectly accompany their tea. Noting Daniel's busy work schedule, Vim enthusiastically expresses his profound desire for Charlotte to taste it. Charlotte gracefully lifts the delicately patterned teacup to her lips while carefully savoring the warm aroma. She softly closes her eyes with a deeply satisfied hum as the delightful flavor washes over. He happily asks if she thoroughly enjoys his highly thoughtful and completely delicious sweet rose gift. He seriously inquires about her terrible nightmares while she softly admits still occasionally experiencing the terrors. Vim playfully romantically offers to comfortably sleep right beside her whenever she desperately needs complete safety. Charlotte sharply lowers her heavy gaze while fiercely blushing at his incredibly bold and romantic offer. Changing the heavy subject, she suddenly curiously asks the great mage about his highly preferred magic. Vim thoughtfully explains his profound absolute mastery over space manipulation alongside basic highly destructive elemental magic. With a highly confident smirk, the powerful sorcerer boldly claims he can successfully wield most magic. Charlotte silently sips her warm tea while intensely carefully processing his incredibly massive boastful magical claims. Setting her delicate cup down, she solemnly prepares to deeply ask an incredibly dangerous heavy question. Staring seriously, she directly intensely asks the mighty sorcerer if he can forcefully reverse time itself. Vim sets his cup down while calmly admitting he might actually successfully wield restricted time magic. Leaning heavily forward, the legendary dark sorcerer highly curiously notes her surprisingly rare interest in magic. His intensely piercing eyes narrow slightly as a highly dark and seriously suspicious aura heavily surrounds. She nervously changes the subject by falsely attributing her deep curiosity to a simple fictional novel. Vim smoothly agrees that people often heavily completely question whether strictly mythical magical powers exist. Vim happily incredibly praises the highly delicious sponge cake expertly baked by the Edelstein family chef. She internally anxiously deeply wonders if highly restricted time magic completely erases the caster's own memories. She clutches her fork tightly while firmly deciding her continuously retained dark memories cannot be coincidental. She desperately intensely vows to completely prevent a tragic sixth death while deeply doubting Lord Vim. Noticing her deeply completely troubled expression, the powerful mage gently and softly asks what is wrong. She quickly forcefully flashes a completely fake smile while verbally fiercely denying any potential lingering problems. She nervously hesitantly deeply asks the incredibly legendary sorcerer why he continually visits her so often. Lying painfully amongst dark roses, she hopelessly completely assumes he completely severely regrets his romantic proposal. The highly legendary dark sorcerer remains completely silently serious while deeply carefully listening to her words. Charlotte and Vim stand quietly together as a tiny magical sound suddenly breaks the heavy quiet silence. Gently touching her soft clothing, Vim mentally confirms his sudden realization exactly as he originally heavily suspected. Charlotte sadly thinks she should have proactively suggested officially ending their complex romantic relationship completely by herself. The legendary dark sorcerer smiles warmly and boldly declares he could never possibly become bored of her. Looking highly serious, Charlotte softly questions why the powerful legendary sorcerer does not completely feel bored yet. Vim quickly reassures her while completely denying the silly romantic joke because she is incredibly sweet indeed. He passionately lists everything he truly loves about her completely genuine and highly adorable flustered romantic reactions. Gazing affectionately into her beautiful eyes, the powerful dark sorcerer romantically swears he wants to look forever. Charlotte remains completely utterly silent while deeply processing his incredibly overwhelming and highly unexpected romantic verbal assault. Sipping her warm tea, she playfully calls him a flatterer while he strongly insists he speaks truthfully. A few short days smoothly magically pass as the lovely scene transitions to the beautiful Scarlet Garden. Charlotte quietly reads a highly important formal royal letter detailing the precise current fate of Prince Alois. The letter clearly explains the utterly disgraced prince has finally begun showing genuine remorse after a month. His Majesty officially highly plans to gracefully release the deeply repentant prince from his dark underground cell. Charlotte completely feels unable to rejoice while nervously reflecting on having survived incredibly longer in this life. Deep panic violently grips her heart as she terrifyingly wonders if repeating time will completely trap her. She bitterly deeply acknowledges that the highly privileged prince will easily walk away completely alive unlike her. Lord Vim suddenly interrupts her dark thoughts by sharply asking what her mysterious muttered words actually mean. Startled by his totally unexpected presence, Charlotte gasps loudly in absolute pure shock and utter confusion. Frantically quickly covering her mouth, she desperately apologizes while falsely blaming her careless slip on sheer exhaustion. She urgently quickly weaves a highly desperate lie about feeling entirely anxious over the sudden room transfer. Completely ignoring the offered grape juice, Vim aggressively presses her to clearly explain her highly suspicious statement. The incredibly extremely powerful legendary mage stares intensely at her with a deadly serious and unwavering gaze. Charlotte nervously lets out a tiny gasp as she fully realizes she cannot easily escape this interrogation. Her wildly racing heart violently pounds in her trembling chest as absolute pure panic entirely consumes her mind. She horrifyingly quickly remembers accidentally revealing her dark recurring nightmare about dying repeatedly inside cell number 6. Staring deeply straight into her eyes, Vim seriously asks if her horrifying experience was merely a dream. Charlotte desperately completely feigns complete absolute ignorance while nervously asking what his highly terrifying question genuinely means. A highly dark shadow completely covers Vim as he solemnly admits something has deeply bothered him recently. He sharply thoroughly lists her highly unnatural absolute knowledge of the dark dungeon and entirely suspicious actions. Fully revealing his knowledge of repeating time, Vim desperately begs the heavily trembling Charlotte for the truth. Charlotte, completely terrified, freezes while suddenly recalling his highly suspicious recent intense interest in forbidden time magic. Staring blankly ahead in absolute shock, she nervously directly asks if he is actually reliving his life. A highly horrifying sudden realization violently strikes her mind as her eyes widen in pure sheer terror. The two deeply stand completely frozen in a deeply tense silence as the heavy dark truth hangs. Lowering her tired head in pure defeat, Charlotte slowly realizes she cannot possibly hide her tragic secret. The legendary dark sorcerer watches her carefully with an incredibly desperate and deeply painful heavy romantic expression. She urgently quickly requests a highly private conversation inside her bedroom so absolutely nobody else overhears them. She gladly completely accepts his highly convenient magical teleportation offer while planning to securely lock her door. Charlotte firmly urgently deeply requests immediate absolute privacy to safely discuss an extremely important completely secret matter. Charlotte pleads with the maids to keep their presence a secret, swearing nothing inappropriate is happening. The two maids exchange a skeptical yet understanding look while listening to Charlotte's desperate and intense plea. One maid agrees to tell others that Lord Vim left and Charlotte went to her room. The maid promises to make sure no one approaches the room for a while during their meeting. She adds that she will check the room herself but only gives them exactly 2 hours together. Inside the room, Charlotte thanks the maid for her cooperation while sitting opposite the silent Lord Vim. Charlotte explains to Vim that she is truly experiencing a bizarre and recurring time reversal phenomenon. Lord Vim looks absolutely stunned and lets out a gasp of genuine surprise at her shocking revelation. Charlotte recounts being falsely accused at the graduation party before being poisoned and dying in the dungeon. Vim asks if the time reversal happened only once or if it occurred multiple times in succession. Charlotte confirms with a somber expression that the tragic cycle has already happened exactly 4 times. She explains managing to avoid conviction in this 5th loop thanks to Lord Vim's timely intervention. Vim is shocked that she lived through those lives while retaining all her memories of the pain. Charlotte sits in a heavy silence while processing the weight of her shared secret with the sorcerer. Vim realizes that he let Charlotte die 4 times without ever appearing to save her before. Charlotte remains silent while looking away as the tension in the room becomes almost completely unbearable. She admits that it is hard to believe their current connection is merely a strange coincidence. She explains time resets to graduation day exactly 1 month before her inevitable death every single time. Vim realizes that only a powerful sorcerer like himself could perform such a massive time reversal. He admits he does not remember doing it and fears he caused her repeated suffering himself. He explains that such powerful magic typically erases the user's memories as a heavy and absolute price. Looking down in profound sorrow, the legendary sorcerer sincerely apologizes to Charlotte for her immense pain. Charlotte observes him and realizes that his genuine pain for what he caused her is truly real. She wonders why he would use such dangerous magic and asks if there is a discovery method. Vim admits it is frustrating being the only one who remembers nothing of the previous time loops. He suspects a grave incident forced the magic and believes Alphas likely holds the missing memories. He wonders if Charlotte is finally safe this time because the incident was successfully avoided now. Lord Vim suddenly calls for his high-ranking demon familiar Alphas to appear in the room immediately. The massive wolf demon materializes in a swirl of dark energy while greeting the two humans playfully. Alphas notes that Vim looks pale and delicious emotions are radiating from the young lady today. Vim accuses the demon of being the reason Charlotte retains her memories after the time reversal. The wolf demon proudly confirms that he cast memory preservation magic on Charlotte during the reversal. Alphas understands they want to know why Vim used the magic and how memories were transferred. Vim firmly offers to trade his own magical power for the information hidden within the demon. Alphas refuses the magic and instead demands to feast on Vim's despair after learning the truth. The demon's eyes gleam with a sadistic hunger as he describes the irresistibly delicious taste of regret. Vim asks if he will feel even more regret while Alphas confirms he will definitely despair. The demon promises to return the information along with all the original memories and intense emotions. Alphas offers to show the memories to Charlotte as well if she truly wishes to see them. Charlotte realizes that the demon is clearly trying to push Lord Vim into a state of despair. She asks if there is another way, but Vim accepts the offer to face the truth. Vim declares he cannot allow himself to run away alone after Charlotte has suffered so much. He firmly states he must face the past as it is and take responsibility for his actions. Charlotte watches him with wide eyes while feeling a surge of intense emotion at his brave resolve. Vim tells her she has every right to know the truth and urges her not to worry. The legendary sorcerer looks at Charlotte and asks her what she truly wants to do now. Charlotte looks back with determination and declares that she wants to know the absolute truth too. Vim smiles gently at her and promises that they will face the truth together as a team. The demon Alphas chuckles and declares that the deal is finally settled between the three of them. Alphas explains he will link their consciousnesses together so they must sit very close to each other. He instructs them to hold hands tightly so the magical connection remains unbroken during the entire process. Charlotte reaches out and gently takes Vim's hand while her heart beats rapidly in intense and quiet anticipation. She feels a strong tension at his fingertips even though his grip remains incredibly soft and gentle. She realizes that even the powerful Lord Vim is likely feeling a sense of fear right now. She notes that he still puts her feelings first despite knowing he will witness absolute despair soon. Charlotte looks at their joined hands and realizes that he is truly an honest and sincere person. Vim looks ahead with a somber expression as the magical light begins to surround the two. Charlotte gives a small encouraging smile to the sorcerer as they prepare to enter his memories. She believes that thanks to him she will finally be able to uncover the hidden truth. Alphas welcomes them to a journey through Vim's memories while his dark aura expands across the room. Charlotte feels a sudden wave of dizziness as the powerful magic pulls her into the past world. Vim calls out her name in concern as she collapses into his arms during the transition. The sorcerer lets out a pained groan while the weight of the memories hits his mind. Their hands remain tightly clasped together as the magical visions begin to manifest around them. The boundaries of reality blur as they are pulled deeper into the fragments of the previous timelines. The wolf demon watches them with a satisfied grin as his plan to feast on despair begins. Alphas wishes them both a sweet dream while chuckling darkly as they slowly lose consciousness together. Observing the desolate scene, he confirmed with absolute shock that this was indeed the Edelstein Manor. Gazing upon the complete devastation, he found it truly unbelievable that things had ended up like this. Scanning the surrounding destruction, it became painfully clear to him that a massive battle took place here. Calling out with desperate urgency, he shouted Daniel's name into the quiet, hauntingly empty ruins. Meanwhile, Daniel desperately hoped that his father, mother, and brother were all safe from the horrific disaster. Reflecting on his own grim situation, he ominously trailed off while contemplating what would happen to him. Suddenly, an unexpected voice calling out to Lord Vim echoed sharply through the tense and heavy atmosphere. Vim wondered if Alpha meant showing memories and emotions together, questioning the voice and his delayed arrival. Realizing Daniel had hidden his aristocratic identity behind a merchant facade, Vim deeply regretted never investigating earlier. Staring at the completely ruined mansion, Vim wondered in absolute disbelief if this was actually Daniel's home. Surveying the hauntingly quiet ruins, Vim absorbed the massive scale of the tragic destruction lying before him. Somewhere nearby, an aggressive soldier furiously demanded to know exactly where Daniel Edelstein was currently hiding. Another soldier suggested leaving the exhausting search since the Duke, his wife, and others had fled elsewhere. The commanding officer firmly reminded them that their sole mission was finding Daniel inside this enormous refuge. Agreeing to withdraw and resume searching at sunrise, the soldiers felt confident their perimeter would trap him. Suddenly, a loud slam echoed through the empty halls, instantly shattering the heavy and highly suffocating silence. Listening closely, Vim suddenly recognized Edelstein as the second most powerful noble family in the Ammerhauser kingdom. Shaking off his rapidly wandering thoughts, Vim sharply realized that he needed to focus entirely on reality. Springing into immediate action, Vim firmly commanded his powerful tracking magic to activate and find his target. Whispering Daniel's name with deep concern, Vim focused all his magical energy on successfully pinpointing his location. Sensing a sudden and strong magical pulse, Vim exclaimed with a massive surge of hope at his success. Looking closely, Vim was completely shocked to discover only the amber communication brooch he had gifted Daniel. Realizing Daniel lacked the time to take the brooch, Vim desperately wondered what terrible fate had befallen him. Examining the surrounding area extremely carefully, Vim questioned aloud if this specific spot held a hidden secret. Suddenly, a distinct sliding noise revealed a cleverly concealed mechanism hidden deep within the ruined wooden floorboards. Peering into the darkness, Vim was highly surprised to uncover a secret underground passage featuring a steep ladder. Without any hesitation, Vim quickly descended into the cold and oppressive darkness of the hidden underground passageway. Moving swiftly downward, his rapid footsteps echoed loudly against the narrow and highly confined stone tunnel walls. Reaching the very bottom of the passage with a final echoing step, Vim carefully scanned the pitch-black shadows. Spotting a collapsed figure resting in the dim light, Vim gasped loudly in absolute shock and dread. Rushing over, Vim called out to Daniel while jokingly complaining about his cold reception to ease the tension. Instead of replying, Daniel merely let out a weak and highly agonizing series of bloody coughs. Seeing his dearest friend's horrific physical condition, Vim screamed Daniel's name with pure terror gripping his heart. The terrifying gravity of the brutal situation hung heavily in the air as Vim frantically assessed the damage. Kneeling beside his gravely injured friend, Vim stared helplessly at the devastating wounds covering Daniel's ruined body. Barely conscious, Daniel weakly apologized while confessing that he could not move his heavily battered body anymore. Demanding to know what caused this tragedy, Vim frantically declared he would use powerful healing magic immediately. Despite his truly desperate magical efforts, Vim realized with mounting horror that there were no signs of recovery. Accepting his grim fate, Daniel calmly told a devastated Vim that he knew his failing body was ruined. Gathering his final shreds of fading strength, Daniel urgently requested to ask Vim one last crucial question. Desperately gasping, Daniel pleaded with Vim to tell him if there was something he could do. Begging earnestly, he urged Vim to retrieve his sister's body hidden somewhere in the royal palace. Taken completely aback by this sudden request, Vim questioned Daniel with pure shock about his sister. Confirming quickly, Daniel listened as Vim asked if he meant Lotte, whom he always proudly praised. Revealing his true identity as Daniel Edelstein, he explained his sister Charlotte was the prince's fiancée. Hearing this massive revelation, Vim widened his eyes in absolute astonishment at the staggering, undeniable truth. Recalling the past, Vim suddenly remembered that she was the lady accused at the graduation party. Reflecting on the event, Vim noted she never protested nor defended herself but simply ran away. Analyzing her desperate escape, Vim quietly acknowledged that her frantic actions seemed like an admission of guilt. Fearing complicity, Vim realized defending her would waste his efforts to stay independent from royal nobles. Viewing intervention as a massive risk, Vim regretfully admitted he pretended to see nothing and left. Digging into his memory, Vim recalled hearing she was imprisoned for a crime after escaping the party. Knowing innocent Charlotte would never choose that path, Daniel insisted she must have had compelling reasons. Considering the horrific circumstances, Vim grimly hypothesized that running away might have been her only option. Despite harboring deep love for his dear sister, Daniel always maintained entirely fair and objective judgment. Struck by heavy guilt, Vim horrifyingly realized this meant he left his friend's innocent sister to die. Explaining their distance due to national policy, Daniel noted his family avoided open royal conflict initially. Fearing growing influence, the royals forced Charlotte's engagement to the crown prince to assert absolute superiority. Exposing their sinister plot, Daniel revealed the royals eagerly awaited any tiny mistake to immediately accuse her. Defending her honor fiercely, Daniel proudly stated that Charlotte remained absolutely perfect and flawless to the core. Seething with rage, Daniel explained Alois fabricated a crime to annul the engagement and achieve darker goals. Hanging on the heavy silence, the unspoken horrors of the prince's ultimate betrayal suffocated the dim room. Citing a reliable palace spy, Daniel painfully recounted how she was placed in an awaiting execution cell. Moving immediately to prove her innocence and save her, Daniel tragically faltered before finishing his doomed sentence. Angered by royal corruption, Daniel explained they illegally withheld evidence and completely ignored requests to reopen cases. Clenching his trembling fists, Daniel tearfully admitted they cruelly refused to let him see his sister once. 3 days later, Daniel received devastating news of her prison death, falsely blamed on severe cold complications. Finding their actions highly suspicious, Daniel recalled them claiming special circumstances to exclusively handle her private burial. Denouncing this excessive abuse of power, Vim angrily deduced they desperately wanted to prevent a physical examination. Coughing up more blood, Daniel bitterly revealed that even receiving that horrific information was a deliberate trap. Abandoning all royal loyalty, Daniel headed toward the temple with knights to claim the responsible Alois' head. Confronted by overwhelmingly numerous royal knights, Daniel bitterly lamented being forcefully forced to retreat from his target. Remembering the rapid slaughter, Daniel sorrowfully explained the royal knights fiercely attacked and crushed their familial home. Connecting the horrific dots, Vim began to realize the grim truth hidden behind the royal family's actions. Confirming the grim truth, Daniel agreed Charlotte's conviction was merely a pretext to crush them as traitors. Expressing his lingering doubts, Daniel cursed the royals for humiliating their family's precious jewel and trampling pride. Spitting with furious venom, Daniel fiercely questioned how he could ever swear absolute allegiance to Prince Alois. Sensing his friend's deep agonizing despair, Vim seriously offered to go and retrieve Alois's severed royal head. Calling him a loyal fool, Daniel weakly smiled and refused to turn his dearest friend into a killer. Groaning through excruciating pain, Vim harshly scolded his friend for asking while already knowing his fierce loyalty. Enduring agonizing suffering, Daniel desperately pleaded for someone to at least take away his immense pain. Gritting his teeth against the fading light, he laid there helplessly as his strength slowly drained away. Releasing a sharp and shuddering breath, a weak gasp escaped his lips into the oppressive silence. Daniel softly explained his parents fled to his former fiancé's kingdom while the loyal servants were captured. Acknowledging Daniel's fiercely loyal servants, Vim recalled how they angrily shared his profound pain over their stolen jewel. Feeling somewhat envious of Daniel seeking help, Vim bitterly confessed that he had tragically abandoned Charlotte. Coughing weakly in the heavy darkness, Daniel softly urged Vim that seeking bloody revenge was entirely unnecessary. Calling him brother, Vim gently asked if he only wanted him to safely bring his precious Charlotte back. Gasping lightly, Daniel agreed they just needed a quiet place deep within the forest to rest peacefully. Hearing his friend's heartbreaking final wishes, Vim cried out Daniel's name with profound and agonizing sorrow. Clinging to his last shreds of fading consciousness, Daniel desperately whispered a final and completely heartbreaking plea. Crying bitterly, Daniel sobbed that he absolutely refused to let his precious sister feel incredibly lonely anymore. Gripping his dear friend's hand tightly, Daniel begged Vim repeatedly with everything he had left inside. Swearing a completely solemn oath, Vim promised to leave immediately and bring his precious sister back right away. Smiling faintly through his immense pain, Daniel whispered a quiet and deeply heartfelt expression of pure gratitude. Breathing his incredibly heavy final breaths, Daniel called out for Charlotte while making one last desperate request. Slowly and inevitably, the remaining bright spark of precious life completely faded from his terribly battered body. Staring in pure and absolute shock, Vim hesitantly whispered his dearest friend's name into the suffocating void. A profoundly devastating and heavy silence rapidly descended upon the cold and incredibly dark underground cavern room. Suddenly breaking the tense silence, a highly agonized gasp tore violently from Vim's heavily trembling dry lips. Sobbing uncontrollably with deep heartbreak, Vim screamed out for his fallen brother in total and absolute despair. Tears streamed furiously down his pale face as he desperately tightly clutched his dearest fallen friend's hand. Experiencing intense shared memories, the tragic realization hit that a duke's daughter brought incredibly cruel familial ruin. Grappling with immense crushing guilt, Vim cursed himself for cowardly abandoning her and failing to help sooner. Overwhelmed by sheer and agonizing sorrow, Vim heavily bowed his lowered head over the cold, motionless body. The devastating and brutal reality of the absolute tragedy firmly settled within his deeply fractured, shattered mind. Gently closing his dearest friend's lifeless eyes, Vim silently vowed to fulfill his incredibly heavy final promise. Rising with fierce and renewed determination, Vim loudly promised to retrieve her swiftly for his fallen brother. Preparing his powerful magic carefully, he deeply observed the dark and incredibly tight confines of the secret place. Stepping away from the heavy scene, he firmly prepared to embark on his highly dangerous rescue mission. Startled by a sudden and sharp realization, Vim let out a heavy gasp of pure surprise. Carefully surveying his dark surroundings, Vim moved swiftly through the incredibly tight and completely silent passageway. Stepping carefully into the heavily shadowed room, he intensely examined the extremely somber and tragic atmosphere. His heart pounding incredibly heavily, Vim approached the dark center of the completely desolate and ruined chamber. Pausing briefly for a highly tense moment, he agonizingly prepared himself for the tragic sight awaiting him. Gazing deeply downward with profound sorrow, he finally laid his eyes upon the heartbreakingly still and lifeless figure. Staring deeply downward, Vim bitterly and sorrowfully lamented that he truly should have saved her back then. Steeling his incredibly fierce resolve, Vim quietly declared he must absolutely fulfill his heavy promise to Daniel. Gently addressing the incredibly tragic fallen lady, Vim respectfully stated it was an honor before suggesting they return. Carefully lifting her incredibly delicate form, he gently carried her terribly light and completely fragile lifeless body. Apologizing with immense sorrow, Vim told Miss Charlotte he was truly sorry while noticing her incredibly light weight. Holding her incredibly closely to his heavy chest, Vim slowly began his highly agonizing and tragic return journey. Walking completely silently through the oppressive shadows, deep waves of immense guilt furiously crashed over his heavy soul. His face darkening quickly with intense emotion, a fiercely bright rage slowly began burning deep inside his chest. Burning with furious anger, Vim absolutely despised Prince Alois and the complicit king for committing such despicable acts. Filled with violent wrath, Vim furiously wished to drag them before Daniel and completely sever their cruel heads. Remembering Daniel's dying wish, Vim painfully recalled his dearest friend absolutely refusing to turn him into a killer. Realizing violence would completely insult Daniel's feelings, Vim agonizingly and deeply regretted not saving her much earlier. Acknowledging that crucial turning point, Vim realized proving her absolute innocence would have undeniably prevented everyone's tragic death. Looking gently at Charlotte, Vim softly confessed the absolutely heartbreaking truth that he was entirely enchanted by her. Imagining a brighter future, Vim sadly envisioned the three happily sitting together while Daniel cheerfully scolded him. Snapping back to highly grim reality, Vim bitterly reminded himself that such happy thoughts were merely a maybe. Staring ahead, Vim fiercely declared he could never forgive those who ruthlessly killed Daniel and his precious sister. Seeking a dark compromise, Vim intensely wondered if making their extremely cruel murderers suffer terribly was fully acceptable. Glancing down softly at the tragic lifeless woman, Vim quietly asked Miss Charlotte what she thought about this. Continuing his dark monologue, he earnestly asked if she truly wanted her cruel tormentors to suffer incredibly intensely. Calling himself despicable for doing absolutely nothing, Vim was suddenly interrupted by someone loudly saying hello. Breaking the heavy silence, the highly mysterious entity smoothly offered to give Vim some extremely valuable advice. Addressing him by the extremely strange nickname Vimpalicious, the heavily echoing voice completely startled the highly tense knight. Offering this highly crucial piece of advice entirely for free, the extremely mysterious presence lingered menacingly nearby. A mysterious voice suddenly interrupts, playfully offering to provide some much-needed advice as a helpful service. Realizing the unexpected presence, the young man quietly murmurs Alpha's name while admitting he never intentionally called. Alpha dramatically feigns hurt feelings, teasingly claiming she was only trying to teach him something genuinely useful. He desperately asks about using return magic, prompting her to knowingly mention the likelihood of evil schemes. She explains that return magic inevitably sends time backward while completely erasing every memory, even the casters. Since nobody remembers anything, she gravely points out that returning would be completely meaningless and endlessly repetitive. Listening intently to her solemn explanation, the devastated young man finally understands the terrible weight of reality. He tragically realizes that without changing the past, his precious loved ones will inevitably die all over again. He bitterly acknowledges that witnessing their unavoidable demise will constantly plunge him right back into crushing despair. She mockingly states that negative emotions will continually feed the demons until the time mage is removed. Interrupting his despair, she excitedly offers a special service allowing one non-mage person to retain their memories. Shocked by this unexpected revelation, his eyes widen in disbelief as he desperately questions if she is serious. Boasting as a memory-controlling demon, she confidently explains that having one person remember greatly increases their survival chances. He cautiously acknowledges that a demon's help always demands a steep price, despite his own absolute desperation. Driven by sheer desperation, he eagerly offers up his magical energy, lifespan, or even his very soul. She calmly explains that such powerful magic deeply interferes with the world system, requiring carefully minimized overall distortion. Due to his currently depleted magical energy, she warns that the spell can only reverse one single month. Cursing his luck, he frustratingly realizes that jumping back 1 month lands precisely on the graduation party day. A vivid memory of the Grand Academy Hall flashes before his tired eyes, showcasing the elegant graduation party. He nervously ponders who could possibly change their doomed fate, worrying about the exact timing of the jump. Recalling everyone's distant locations on that fateful day, he grimly deduces that nobody will arrive in time. Left with absolutely no other viable options, a heavy realization quickly settles over his completely exhausted, trembling form. Turning his attention toward a beautifully tragic memory, he softly asks Miss Charlotte for a monumental, life-changing favor. He guiltily confesses his fear of dragging her right back into a miserable, never-ending cycle of painful suffering. Despite the immense risk, he sadly admits that she is the absolute only hope he has left now. Suddenly jolted from the vision, Charlotte gasps loudly as the profound weight of his desperate plea hits her. He firmly asks Alpha to activate the return magic whenever he completely finalizes his desperate, high-stakes magical preparations. The cheerful demon confirms the young lady will retain her memories, instructing him to touch her gently now. Slowly reaching through the dense shadows, his glowing hand gently stretches out to firmly initiate the magical connection. He earnestly apologizes for spotting her hidden in the dark shadows and selfishly using her as a useful tool. Bowing his head in deep sorrow, he sincerely apologizes for placing such an impossibly heavy burden upon her. He passionately pleads with her to bravely grant him one final chance to protect her and save Daniel. Utterly desperate and out of time, he firmly begs Miss Charlotte to help rewrite their tragic ending. A sudden shift in reality causes a confused gasp as a mysterious voice asks if she has returned. A cheerfully smiling figure warmly welcomes her back, signaling the undeniable success of the dangerous time reversal spell. The grinning entity playfully mentions that the timeline just witnessed was actually the tragic fourth iteration shown previously. Licking its lips, the strange being creepily comments on how wonderfully delicious and deeply satisfying both humans are. Chuckling softly, the demon gleefully tells them to completely relax while thoroughly enjoying their bizarre trip through memories. Charlotte suddenly snaps to full attention, letting out a sharp breath as the incredibly overwhelming memories flood back. She grimly realizes that Prince Alois would absolutely never have overlooked the destruction of her beloved family members. Realizing they repeated it 4 times, she notes that thinking carefully would have made everything clear. Regretfully acknowledging her selfishness, she admits being entirely caught up in her own overwhelming feelings then. Maintaining a heavy silence, the two figures reflect deeply on the emotional weight of their situation. Staring solemnly into the distance, a quiet moment of profound contemplation settles heavily between them both. Breaking the tense silence softly, she murmurs Lord Vim's name while looking at him with concern. He asks Alpha to explain exactly what transpired during the previous timelines before this fifth iteration. Listening carefully to the urgent question, the companion prepares to recount the tragic events that unfolded. Recalling the very first timeline, she explains how she desperately but fruitlessly claimed her total innocence. She reveals that nobody believed her when she was unfairly confronted with perfectly fabricated false evidence. Nodding slowly in somber agreement, he quietly acknowledges the harsh reality of her initial tragic failure. During the second timeline, she emotionally cried while proclaiming her innocence but suffered the exact same result. Offering another quiet affirmation, he listens intently as the heartbreaking cycle of repeated despair is revealed. In the third attempt, she requested postponing the discussion, but the cruel conviction was forcefully pushed through. Breathing out a soft gasp, he comprehends the crushing futility of her desperate previous diplomatic attempts. Summarizing the endless misery, she confirms that the fourth timeline unfolded exactly as he saw earlier. She tragically remembers being thrown into a cold prison 1 month after the devastating party conviction. Realizing her grave mistake, she admits falling into Alpha's trap by repeatedly using return magic for Daniel. Agreeing thoughtfully with her deduction, he softly concedes that she likely played directly into the enemy's hands. He shockingly asks if he repeatedly satisfied the demon's desire after unfortunately abandoning her back then. A heavy wave of profound guilt washes over him as the terrifying implications of his actions settle. Understanding her pain, he realizes her party outburst was purely heartbreak after struggling endlessly without any change. Gazing downward in absolute shame, he silently processes the immense emotional torment she was forced to endure. A sharp gasp escapes his lips as the full weight of her repeated suffering finally hits him. Expressing deep sympathy, he gently acknowledges how unbearably painful it was when she actually wished for death. Overwhelmed by deep regret, he emotionally wonders aloud how he could possibly atone for such immense suffering. Tears welling up, he sincerely apologizes multiple times for the agonizing pain his past actions ultimately caused. Standing completely still, she watches him break down while carefully processing his incredibly heartfelt and desperate apology. Urging him to stop apologizing, she gently reminds him that he was only trying to save them. She insists that repeating time is far better than painfully enduring a world where her brother dies. Hearing her profound words, he softly whispers Charlotte's name while looking at her with absolute sheer awe. She warmly assures him that his choice was not wrong since she is currently with her family. Having finally learned the truth, she openly confesses that her feelings toward him reflect deep gratitude instead. Still struggling with his intense guilt, he bitterly questions himself about abandoning her on that fateful day. She logically reasons that helping a stranger against skillfully forged evidence and royal influence is extremely difficult. Clenching his fists tightly, he stubbornly mutters that he should have done much more for her regardless. She reminds him that the conspiring prince is guilty and notes he never knew her true identity. Understanding his past hesitation, she calls his miraculous intervention this time a true blessing against the culprit. Smiling softly with pure gratitude, she acknowledges that he loyally stayed by her brother across every timeline. Through the magic of recollection, she painfully felt his deep remorse and mourning for her fallen brother. Reaching absolute peace with the tragic past, she definitively states that she cannot ever blame Lord Vim. Smiling softly, she sincerely thanks him for entrusting her with the safety of their precious future. Pausing mid-sentence, he suddenly hesitates while letting out a quiet gasp of sudden profound emotional realization. Admitting she tried remarkably hard, she softly requests his heartfelt praise rather than another unnecessary apology. Gently reaching out, he intimately holds her trembling hands while conveying his deep, unspoken emotional gratitude. Closing the distance between them, he leans in closely to affectionately kiss her soft outstretched hands. Teasingly observing his dramatic tears, a companion notes that Vim still goes completely overboard with metaphors. Defending his emotional words, Vim insists he is not exaggerating because she remains far too modest. Staring deeply into her eyes, he tenderly holds her gaze while expressing his boundless, profound admiration. He passionately thanks her for repeatedly altering her actions to completely change their shared tragic future. Calling her his saving goddess, he happily rejoices that his dream of sharing tea finally manifested. Overwhelmed by his intense sincerity, she simply listens in stunned silence as his heartfelt words continue. Moving with absolute purpose, he gracefully drops to one knee like a devoted knight seeking favor. Looking up with fierce determination, he fearlessly declares his unwavering commitment against any looming formidable enemies. Swearing to stand by her forever, he offers his unwavering magical pledge of absolute lifelong loyalty. Acknowledging his deeply shameful request, he cautiously asks if she could kindly grant him another chance. Utterly taken aback by his sudden bold words, she quietly repeats his question with lingering confusion. He earnestly clarifies that he desperately seeks a precious chance to beg her with pure love. Vowing to erase her past pain, he passionately promises to make her the happiest beautiful woman. Offering his magic and time, he earnestly begs her to walk the path of life together. Blushing intensely under his devoted gaze, she struggles to fully comprehend the magnitude of his confession. Letting out a soft gasp, she nervously touches her flushed cheeks while processing his overwhelming offer. Realizing his pure heart would rewrite time itself, she silently imagines a truly happy romantic future. Despite feeling genuine warmth, she hesitates internally while anxiously wondering if his sudden affection will last. Remembering the cruel royal betrayal, she painfully recalls how her former fiancé mercilessly cast her aside. Because that past betrayal completely shattered her heart, she lacks the confidence to maintain Vim's love. Fearing another devastating betrayal from someone she loves, she stubbornly concludes that avoiding attachments is safer. Apologizing softly for needing more time, she feels deeply relieved when he patiently accepts her hesitation. Gently reassuring her anxious mind, he kindly insists that there is nothing wrong with being uncertain. Promising absolute transparency moving forward, he actively encourages her to openly ask about any lingering concerns. Acting slightly bolder than usual, he politely asks if he may continue visiting for afternoon tea. She shyly agrees to his sweet proposal while he joyfully promises to bring a delicious cake. Offering a warm and comforting smile, he gracefully bids her farewell until their next lovely meeting. Watching his retreating figure, she wistfully wonders if staying with such an honest man could heal her. Her loyal friends quickly approach her while curiously asking if her lengthy private conversation has finished. Observing her peaceful expression, they joyfully note that she looks perfectly fine without any chaotic distress. Apologizing for causing unnecessary worry, she gratefully appreciates spending peaceful time with her beloved friends again. Gazing thoughtfully into the distance, she internally questions how she can ever find true romantic courage. Charlotte softly confesses to herself that she finally understands the profound reason why her tragic life keeps continuously repeating. Despite this grand revelation, she still heavily struggles to find a proper answer regarding her complex relationship with Vim. She softly blushes while recalling how Lord Vim passionately asked for a chance to earn her precious love. She happily notes that Lord Vim visits their grand estate daily to openly display his deep, sincere feelings. Clutching her chest nervously, she sadly admits that she still cannot bring her anxious heart to accept him. She deeply wonders how she can gain enough courage, knowing the core emotional problem strictly lies within herself. While she possesses immense confidence regarding etiquette, those refined skills prove utterly useless in matters of true love. She lowers her gaze with a troubled expression, silently acknowledging that another severe problem demands immediate, focused attention. A wave of deep anxiety visibly washes over her pale face as she contemplates the difficult political situation. She carefully reviews a formal message proposing the controversial transfer of imprisoned Prince Alois into a private room. Although her parents allowed her to refuse, His Majesty desperately wishes to give his disgraced son another chance. A sudden, sharp knocking sound echoing through the quiet room abruptly interrupts her highly anxious train of thought. A polite maid promptly announces Lord Vim's arrival, prompting Charlotte to warmly thank her before elegantly rising up. Lord Vim warmly greets Charlotte with a dazzling smile as she formally welcomes her distinguished guest inside today. He kindly presents some wonderfully delicious sweets to accompany their tea, causing her to graciously thank him now. She silently reflects that these daily, intimate tea gatherings with Lord Vim sometimes cause her a tiny worry. Sipping her warm tea, she happily admits these sweet moments have steadily become her favorite source of relaxation. Lord Vim gently promises to personally prepare a beautiful country and comfortable castle if kingdom life ever troubles her. He softly asks if she has any preferences, but she quickly denies harboring such incredibly extravagant personal desires. He confidently urges her not to hold back her true desires while gazing at her with unwavering affection. She sweats nervously while silently worrying that his incredibly extravagant spending habits are progressively getting much worse daily. She firmly tells him his warm feelings are entirely enough and gently advises him to save his wealth. He finds her genuine worry deeply touching, gently assuring her there is absolutely no need to fret further. He calmly explains that exclusive magical tools from Chromheight's kingdom will be freely sold continentally after 10 years. He confidently adds that he is currently developing advanced new magic allowing trusted craftsmen to produce even more. He calmly asserts that taking this lucrative business seriously could effortlessly make him the absolute richest man alive. He softly promises to personally prepare absolutely anything she ever desires so she will never suffer any lack. She looks down silently, internally wishing for a remarkably strong heart capable of fully believing his devoted feelings. Staring deeply into his eyes, she softly wonders if he could somehow magically prepare that beautifully resilient heart. She panics upon realizing such a highly intimate request sounds exactly like gracefully accepting a formal marriage proposal. Daniel suddenly bursts inside, fiercely demanding Vim stop relentlessly tempting his beloved sister with endless, shiny, extravagant wealth. As Daniel promises to provide her a grand castle himself, Vim calmly questions his suddenly magical, inconvenient arrival. Daniel confidently claims his special brotherly senses have peaked, boldly calling Vim's romantic timing utterly and thoroughly disgusting. Charlotte offers her overprotective brother a slight, nervous apology while quietly chuckling at the incredibly chaotic family interruption. She silently feels greatly relieved by her brother's timely arrival, knowing she was dangerously close to giving in. While Vim complains about Daniel needing sisterly detachment, she secretly wishes this peacefully chaotic moment could last longer. A serious, highly confidential letter sealed with a prominent wax crest heavily weighs on their deeply troubled minds. Vim gravely explains that recent memory magic revealed the royal family possesses terrifyingly immense military strength beyond expectations. He solemnly warns that if the Edelstein family remains under Ammerhauser, they must entirely avoid angering His Majesty. The Grand Royal Palace stands tall and imposing under the bright sky, casting a heavy, intimidating shadow ahead. Calling out to her sibling softly, she immediately grabs her dear brother's complete and undivided attention. Responding to his prompt, she reveals her serious consideration regarding accepting His Majesty's highly anticipated message. He acknowledges that accepting the apology and gaining a royal debt of obligation is undeniably wiser. Wanting to fiercely protect her devoted family and loyal servants, she reluctantly agrees to face him. Catching him completely off guard, she utters a sudden interjection that leaves him thoroughly visibly confused. Offering to accompany her alongside Alpha, he suggests verifying whether the incoming apology is genuinely heartfelt. She kindly declines his offer because gaining a strategic political debt remains the kingdom's primary objective. She admits that even a perfectly sincere apology would never successfully earn her deep, genuine forgiveness. Sighing softly, he realizes he lacks a role here since the prince's true intentions no longer matter. Smiling warmly, he affectionately pats his beloved sister's head to offer some much-needed comforting emotional support. Radiating a gentle smile, she sincerely thanks both of her companions for their deep, unwavering concern. Bright sunlight fully illuminates the majestic royal castle as the fateful day of the meeting finally arrives. Bowing politely, a respectful servant apologizes for the delay before graciously offering to guide them inside. The elegant servant confidently leads the silent guests down a remarkably grand and lavishly decorated hallway. The polite guide respectfully requests Daniel to wait while carefully directing Miss Charlotte toward another room. Reaching an incredibly large and ornate wooden door, the servant carefully turns the heavy metal handle. Stepping forward slowly, her sharp eyes immediately scan the luxurious room while anticipating the upcoming encounter. Her steady footsteps echo softly across the polished floor as she bravely enters the quiet room. Sitting quietly at a highly decorated table, the contemplative prince patiently awaits his honored female guest. Maintaining her perfect aristocratic composure, Charlotte gracefully offers a slight bow upon approaching the royal table. Acknowledging her arrival at his personal request, he warmly encourages her to make herself completely comfortable. Boldly accepting his polite offer, she elegantly takes a seat and decides to act completely natural. A profoundly heavy silence envelopes the grand room as they intensely gaze into each other's eyes. Noting that 2 months have passed, she genuinely expects the prince to remain completely different today. Breaking the unbearable tension, he softly notes that a very long time has passed since then. Correcting his familiar tone, he formally addresses her as Miss Charlotte while expressing his immense gratitude. Gesturing toward a beautifully arranged table, he sincerely hopes she truly enjoys his specially prepared treats. Observing the delicious assortment, she internally wonders if His Highness actually knows her specific personal preferences. Dismissing the sentimental thought immediately, she rationally concludes that his clever servants easily gathered this information. Considering the delicious strawberry cake a small reward, she justifies attending this entirely unwanted private meeting. The delicate ceramic plate clinks softly against the table as she elegantly picks up her fork. Taking a tiny bite of the sweet pastry, she silently savors the incredibly rich dessert flavors. Letting out a tiny chuckle, she playfully notes that the royal chef still retains wonderful skills. He fondly recalls that her absolutely loveliest childhood expressions always appeared while she happily ate cake. Claiming to know her better than anyone else, he confidently asserts his deep certainty regarding this. Delivering a bittersweet observation, he solemnly states that she never loved him more than sweet cake. Freezing in absolute surprise, she holds her silver fork completely still while processing his shocking statement. Dropping her fork with a sharp clink, she bluntly asks if he truly wanted her love. He confesses choosing Christina precisely because she completely lacked Charlotte's perfectly overwhelming grace and noble lineage. Remembering their first enchanting encounter, he reveals the indescribable happiness he felt upon making her his fiancée. The prince confesses that at some point he began seeing her purely as a powerful rival. He explains that despite his hard efforts, she precisely calculated everything while remaining one step behind. She gently replies that she only did her best to avoid embarrassing His Highness publicly. She admits she never realized her sincere efforts might have deeply hurt his fragile royal pride. He sadly recalls meeting Miss Christina while feeling entirely empty watching her reluctantly fulfill royal duties. She knowingly asks if spending time with that other woman truly failed to fill his emptiness. He sadly admits that seeing her remain completely unbothered by jealousy only deepened his internal void. The prince tearfully confesses that his foolish emptiness turned into hatred, causing those cruel, punishing decisions. Looking absolutely miserable and defeated, he offers a deeply sincere apology for all his past actions. The once proud prince astonishingly lowers his dignity and completely bows his head in profound apology. She politely asks him to raise his head while clearly stating she understands his remorseful feelings. She formally wishes that his days ahead will remain completely peaceful and quiet in his room. With calm composure, she declares she has fully accomplished her purpose of accepting his royal apology. As she turns away, she mentions that she would genuinely like to finally take her leave. Reaching out desperately, he pleadingly asks if it is truly impossible for her to forgive him. Pausing mid-step, she lets out a soft gasp of surprise at his sudden, desperate, emotional plea. She calmly reminds him that His Majesty solely decided his punishment while she holds no authority. Refusing to give up, he desperately asks if she could consider holding his hands once again. She directly asks if he means renewing their engagement while he eagerly confirms that exact intention. Staring deeply into her eyes, he passionately declares that he finally realizes how precious she is. Acknowledging he cannot make her queen, he still deeply desires returning to a mutually supportive relationship. He dramatically vows to serve her with absolute loyalty while begging to remain by her side. Shocked by his desperate begging, she internally notes that she never imagined witnessing this sheer submission. She nervously worries that refusing him might severely embarrass her noble family regarding his reduced punishment. Despite fearing his potential betrayal, she absolutely refuses to live with His Highness ever once again. Stating firmly that things are forever over, she flatly declares she cannot accept his renewed engagement. Suddenly, a violent blur of motion erupts as an unforeseen dangerous attacker aggressively strikes the scene. A sharp gasp escapes her lips as she completely freezes in absolute shock at the attack. A desperate voice loudly commands everyone to immediately press their backs against the tall glass windows. A crazed captor viciously threatens to drive a sharp fork into her neck if anyone resists. Threatening to plunge his blade without mercy, the desperate prince orders everyone toward the distant windows. Gripping his weapon tightly, Alois firmly commands his own father to remain completely motionless and still. Staring down the heavily armed prince, a stern voice demands the immediate release of poor Charlotte. Expressing deep frustration over the difficult situation, the captor insists on having a private conversation with her. A sudden rustling sound breaks the intense silence as the dangerous prince shifts his firm grip entirely. Pulling his frightened hostage closer, he maneuvers cautiously through the incredibly tense and totally silent room. Reluctantly yielding to the dangerous standoff, a tense voice finally agrees to his incredibly stubborn demands. Keeping a tight grip on her, the unhinged captor commands Charlotte to walk toward the nearby sofa. Glaring fiercely at his father and the surrounding crowd, he loudly warns everyone against interfering any further. Forcing her into a vulnerable position, he strictly orders his trembling hostage to raise both her hands. Trembling under the terrifying threat, the frightened girl slowly raises her hands exactly as he cruelly demanded. Feeling a sudden rough tug, she angrily mutters her intense disgust at his completely unacceptable, forceful behavior. Mocking her highly distressed reaction, he cruelly accuses Charlotte of exaggerating her painful response as usual today. Confused by his strange accusation, she nervously demands to know exactly what his completely baffling words mean. He confusingly claims innocence regarding the fabricated evidence and insists he never actually threw anyone into prison. Deeply frustrated by the ongoing situation, she angrily questions why she must bear such an unfair burden. He cunningly argues that leaving people completely trapped in terrible misunderstandings makes her equally guilty of wrongdoing. Staring at the defensive prince, she challenges his obvious belief that his imposed punishment was completely unfair. She painfully recalls the intense suffering of being ruthlessly persecuted 4 separate times across her past lives. Acknowledging a slight change in destiny, she admits escaping the horrific 6th cell during this current loop. Despite avoiding that specific dungeon, she tearfully declares that the agonizing trauma of past imprisonments remains forever. Refusing to dismiss her enduring trauma, she firmly insists those terrible past events cannot simply be ignored. Watching her highly emotional outburst, the bewildered prince suddenly calls out her name with a piercing gaze. Leaning closer with a knowing smirk, he boldly accuses her of repeatedly reliving her own tragic life. Gasping in sheer terror at his shocking revelation, her completely widened eyes betray her deeply hidden secret. Desperately trying to hide the truth, she quickly accuses him of spouting wild delusions to evade responsibility. He confidently reminds her that he only takes bold, risky hostage actions when securing a guaranteed victory. Revealing his intense prison studies, he explains how reading complex magic books helped him uncover the truth. Staring intently into her frightened eyes, he proudly reveals his shocking discovery regarding real-time reversal magic. Feigning complete ignorance once again, she nervously asks if he truly believes in such fairy tale magic. He calmly admits that performing such a legendary spell remains incredibly difficult even within this modern era. Connecting the missing puzzle pieces, he confidently brings up the incredibly talented genius mage known as Vim. Believing Vim is completely capable of time magic, the cunning prince finally solves a long troubling mystery. Unable to completely hide her growing dread, the terrified girl softly asks him about this supposed mystery. He chillingly points out her impossible knowledge regarding the horrific 6th cell despite never entering it beforehand. Pausing dramatically to let the heavy tension build, he slowly prepares to deliver his absolute final deduction. He notes how completely incomprehensible it was when she insisted her desperate warnings about curses were ignored. He triumphantly concludes that her impossible knowledge makes perfect sense if she actually used time reversal magic. Cornering his totally defenseless captive, he directly accuses her of using Lord Vim to avoid unfair convictions. Demanding immediate answers, the desperate prince furiously asks what terrible price she paid the careful genius mage. The intense interrogator aggressively demands to know the decisive factor that ultimately convinced him to use time reversal magic. Feeling immense pressure mounting around her, Charlotte nervously groans while sweating under his fierce and unwavering interrogation. She mentally clarifies that she never personally negotiated since using the magic was Lord Vim's own despairing decision. She realizes that revealing the absolute truth would inevitably expose her dear brother's past rebellion against the state. Breaking the heavy silence, the prince sharply calls her name and coldly demands an immediate answer from her. She gasps softly while contemplating how the king wishes to erase stains and might take her family hostage. Knowing the severe risks, she decides she absolutely cannot reveal the truth about forcing the time reversal magic. Clutching her chest tightly in quiet distress, she internally considers another heartbreaking complication piling on top of everything. Desperation fills her racing mind as she fiercely vows never to make Lord Vim suffer like that again. She mentally panics because nobody would believe her honest denial, and she cannot formulate a single convincing lie. She fears that exposing any lie would instantly provoke his lethal anger and bring a blade against her. Lowering her head in defeat, she quietly apologizes while desperately trying to hide the dangerous secrets she holds. She claims her fragmented memory prevents her from remembering anything, leaving the prince visibly skeptical about her excuse. She lies about suddenly finding herself back inside the graduation hall after being completely isolated in her cell. She cautiously suggests she was perhaps granted a rare chance to meet Lord Vim despite her uncertain memories. The dangerous prince leans forward slightly while a highly sinister and scheming smirk slowly appears across his face. His piercing eye narrows sharply as he carefully calculates the tremendous potential value of this completely unexpected revelation. Realizing Lord Vim deeply cares for her, he confidently decides she can be used as a valuable trump card. She bitterly realizes his desire to renew their engagement was utterly false because she remains a mere chess piece. Maintaining his arrogant grin, the prince slyly points out that Lord Vim frequently visits the noble Edelstein residence. The prince orders his loyal subordinates to forcefully bring Lord Vim before him exactly when Daniel returns today. Seeking to protect her completely, Daniel bravely volunteers himself as a hostage so his sister can leave safely. Daniel desperately argues that his friendly relationship with Vim makes him an incredibly valuable and effective political hostage. The cautious prince rejects the offer by arguing that taking a highly skilled swordsman hostage increases his risks. He coldly proposes that he might consider the deal if Daniel surrenders his dagger and accepts strong bindings. Staring back with absolute determination burning in his eyes, Daniel fiercely agrees to the incredibly harsh proposed conditions. Maintaining his brave composure, Daniel directly asks His Majesty to quickly arrange the restrictive ropes and the dagger. Trembling in absolute horror at his selfless sacrifice, Charlotte cries out her beloved brother's name in sheer panic. Tears well up in her frantic eyes as she hopelessly begs him to abandon this extremely dangerous plan. Suddenly, a reassuring voice firmly tells Daniel that such desperate measures are completely unnecessary as a hand appears. Making an incredibly dramatic and perfectly timed entrance, Lord Vim cheerfully greets everyone with a highly confident smile. Charlotte and Daniel stare in sheer disbelief, completely stunned that Lord Vim has miraculously appeared at this exact moment. Maintaining his bold stride, Lord Vim shifts his intense focus forward and directly addresses the highly arrogant prince. Offering a seemingly polite remark, he casually observes that the cunning prince looks completely healthy and unusually spirited. Wasting no time on pleasantries, the impatient prince directly asks if Lord Vim can actually use time reversal magic. Flashing a mysteriously confident grin toward the shocked crowd, Vim completely shatters the tension by casually confirming it. Chuckling with dark amusement, Vim mockingly wonders aloud if the incredibly greedy prince is finally demanding his turn next. The prince wildly demands a return to his graduation with memories intact while offering Charlotte as the price. Offering to smoothly annul her engagement without conviction, the manipulative prince suggests this incredibly wicked trade to Vim. Gasping in complete absolute horror, Charlotte realizes she is being ruthlessly bartered away like a worthless disposable object. She calmly declares that there is absolutely no point in talking about any compensation now. She explains that even her maximum magical power cannot turn time back to the graduation ceremony. The deeply shocked prince desperately asks her what she just said with a trembling voice. She clarifies the short 1-month limit would only force him to repeat prison life. Staring in pure disbelief, he softly gasps while utterly failing to comprehend her shocking words. She angrily questions if he actually expects her to use time reversal magic for him. Furthermore, she warns that unaffected mages would surely arrive to permanently erase the responsible party. The terrified prince suddenly realizes that he would also be permanently erased from existence entirely. She coldly confirms this while stating that dying alongside him would be the worst outcome. She quietly notes that winning remains completely impossible if enemies overwhelm Lord Vim with numbers. The deranged captor laughs loudly while suggesting she simply entrust everything to high-ranking demons. She admits that despite her fearsome title, her human soul would ultimately face demonic consumption. She chillingly adds that she would inevitably drag His Highness down into endless darkness alongside her. Completely overwhelmed by her grim explanation, the horrified prince stammers silently in pure helpless despair. A sudden sharp gasp escapes the surprised captor as an unexpected magical force violently interrupts them. A blinding flash of powerful protective magic suddenly engulfs the room as a heroic savior rapidly arrives. The newly arrived hero apologizes for being slightly delayed while stepping forward to quickly save her life. Lord Vim quickly reassures her while explaining he carefully avoided teleportation to prevent severe neck injuries. Overwhelmed with profound emotion, she finally gathers her courage and desperately confesses her deep romantic love. He firmly embraces her tightly while expressing immense relief that she is finally completely safe. Another ally gratefully thanks Vim before curiously asking how he magically arrived without any formal summoning. Vim explains that the magic indirectly responded because the prince intensely focused on her safety. He softly points out that she loyally continued wearing his special protective charm even today. She warmly replies that the protective charm truly worked very well during this dangerous crisis. Smiling with gentle affection, he sincerely agrees that her continued safety is a truly wonderful thing. She quickly comforts her deeply apologetic brother while assuring him that nobody blames him today. Her expression hardens as she dramatically turns her attention toward the one who is truly at fault. Groaning in deep pain, the defeated prince finally admits that he is the one entirely at fault. The stern monarch angrily declares that the ungrateful boy repaid precious kindness with absolute, unforgivable malice. Ordering guards to take him away immediately, the king permanently banishes Alois back to cell 6. A calm voice firmly reminds everyone that Alois took Charlotte hostage and shamelessly tried exploiting others. Stepping gracefully into the tense room, a confident figure smoothly asks if the king summoned him. Thanking them for the grand opportunity, Lord Vim prepares to carefully state his highly anticipated demands. Standing tall before the royal gathering, the powerful mage formally announces he has 3 specific requests. He clearly states he wants nobody suddenly appearing and foolishly demanding that his special magic be used. His first request strictly bans anyone from speaking about the incredibly complex nature of time reversal magic. Secondly, he strictly forbids any royal investigation into his personal, highly guarded reasons for rewinding time. He chillingly threatens to erase the entire kingdom from existence if they ever forcefully demand his secrets. Sweating nervously under the intense pressure, the intimidated king quickly promises to entirely drop the dangerous matter. A heavy, suffocating silence immediately fills the grand hall as the royal attendees absorb the terrifying threat. Smiling with quiet satisfaction, Vim expresses genuine gladness before smoothly moving on to his final formal request. Realizing mere imprisonment will never evoke true remorse, he coldly suggests that something much harsher is completely necessary. Without a single ounce of hesitation, the serious mage formally requests explicit permission to permanently curse Alois. The visibly shocked king nervously questions what specific kind of terrible magical curse Vim actually intends to use. Vim explains that Alpha will constantly create terrifying hallucinations to feed upon the disgraced prince's arising fear. Utterly stunned by the terrifying magical proposition, the trembling king reluctantly gives his official royal approval anyway. Hearing the king's final approval, the mischievous little magical creature jumps happily while cheerfully celebrating the news. The shadowy creature laughs sinisterly while gleefully imagining how every single day will become an absolute feast. Hearing his incredibly doomed fate, the completely devastated prince mutters quietly in absolute disbelief and profound despair. Heavy metal doors slam shut forcefully, sealing the defeated criminal away into eternal, dark, and terrifying isolation. Daniel gently advises Charlotte to return home while he stays behind to handle the complicated royal discussions. He instructs her to blame Alois losing his mind and securely hide the dangerous time magic from father. Turning toward the incredibly powerful mage, Daniel firmly asks Vim to safely escort his precious sister home. Flashing a confident and reassuring smile, the dependable mage tells the protective brother to leave everything to him. The 2 silent companions slowly walk down the grand palace corridors, leaving the heavy royal drama firmly behind. Vim gently reaches out to softly touch her delicate shoulder, offering quiet comfort during their peaceful walk. Charlotte internally worries that they desperately need to reach a proper answer regarding this deeply complicated matter quickly. Looking up with slight hesitation, she politely asks Lord Vim for a little private time upon returning. Smiling warmly, he immediately accepts her request, claiming he would gladly give her countless hours of his time. Bidding each other a temporary farewell, she tells her brother to be extremely careful remaining at the palace. The luxurious carriage smoothly departs from the towering royal palace, finally carrying the exhausted pair safely back home. Upon arriving safely at the Grand Duke's mansion, her anxious parents immediately rush forward to closely inspect her. Panicking wildly, her distressed mother frantically asks if she was hurt while angrily questioning the prince's foolish actions. Smiling gently to soothe their intense worries, she softly assures her frantic parents that Lord Vim protected her. She calmly explains that her capable brothers stayed behind to handle palace matters so they shouldn't worry anymore. Still boiling with intense protective anger, her furious father declares he will immediately head toward the royal palace. A calm voice firmly states that the punishment is enough since the disgraced prince will never escape again. The understanding father kindly accepts the situation without further complaint, prompting Charlotte to sincerely thank him. Turning toward her father, Charlotte respectfully requests permission to go out with Lord Vim for a while. Her father graciously allows the outing, requesting their return before dinner to formally thank Lord Vim. Acknowledging her father's reasonable request with a gentle nod, she calmly confirms her complete understanding. Stepping away from the grand estate together, a peaceful silence comfortably settles between the two companions. Glancing down at the beautiful noblewoman, Vim patiently waits for her to decide their next destination. When asked about their destination, she gently requests a quiet place where absolutely nobody will disturb them. Understanding her heartfelt desire for complete privacy, he smoothly extends his hand while preparing a spell. She willingly places her delicate hand within his firm grasp as powerful magical energy begins building. Radiant magical light intensely swirls around their bodies, preparing to transport them across the vast kingdom. The blinding magical glow slowly fades, revealing a completely different and utterly unfamiliar quiet location. Looking around the strange new environment with immense curiosity, Charlotte softly asks about this mysterious place. Standing proudly in the quiet sanctuary, Vim comfortably reveals that this secluded location is his true home. He calmly explains that living here safely protects both his personal well-being and his highly sensitive research. Assuring her complete privacy, he mentions placing strong illusion and protective magic entirely around the hidden property. Feeling slightly self-conscious about his simple sanctuary, he politely apologizes for the dull and inelegant atmosphere. Pushing open a heavy wooden door, he suggests that this specific room is probably best for talking. Observing countless books, she learns that his magical parents initially helped him accumulate this massive collection. While he complains about lacking shelf space, she internally admires the diligent effort behind his undeniable genius. Gesturing toward a comfortable chair in the cozy room, he politely invites her to take a seat. When asked about his magical parents, he explains they departed on a journey upon his coming of age. He adds that they found a new master during their extensive travels and never returned even once. Noticing the obvious lack of servants around the quiet house, she curiously asks about his daily chores. He cheerfully clarifies that he actually leaves cooking and laundry to the servants at his other mansion. Admitting he only cleans this particular house, he playfully warns her not to expect exceptional tea-making skills. Moving with practiced elegance, he carefully gathers the delicate supplies and begins properly brewing the warm tea. The aromatic steam gently rises from the perfectly steeped pot as he finishes preparing the soothing beverage. Holding the delicate porcelain saucer with absolute care, he smoothly carries the freshly poured cup toward her. Offering a warm and highly inviting smile, he gently hands the beautiful teacup directly to his guest. Accepting the warm beverage with a graceful nod, she softly thanks him before taking a small sip. Smiling sweetly over the rim, she quickly praises the surprisingly delicious brew despite his earlier humble warnings. Her eyes widen with pure delight as she suddenly realizes this specific tea is her absolute favorite. Gripping the warm cup tightly, she silently wonders how he perfectly knew her preferences without prior discussion. Blushing deeply in the quiet room, she nervously asks if he has finally grown tired of her. Hearing her incredibly vulnerable question, his eyes widen slightly as a wave of deep affection hits him. Leaning forward with intense and undeniable sincerity, he passionately declares that he truly loves her with everything. He expresses a deep, burning desire to witness her different expressions while talking together for endless hours. Swearing he could never grow tired, he joyfully explains that merely being alone together makes him sore. Overwhelmed by deep devotion, he passionately confesses loving her so much that he can hardly bear it. Deeply moved by his incredibly heartfelt confession, a blushing Charlotte softly begins expressing her own matching feelings. She gently expresses her deep romantic affection by finally admitting that she truly likes him. He softly questions if she is still completely unable to believe his genuine romantic feelings. Admitting her internal struggle, she explains that despite his honesty, she simply cannot trust herself. She tearfully confesses having absolutely no confidence in her ability to maintain his precious feelings. Looking up with profound admiration, she sincerely praises him as a truly wonderful, noble person. She sadly remembers how her previous fiancé of 10 years never developed any real feelings. Acknowledging his sincere emotions, she still believes he would continue caring for her after an engagement. Even with those reassurances, she remains deeply afraid that he will eventually become annoyed with her. She solemnly realizes that the cruel betrayal by the former prince hurt her immensely deep inside. She worries that spending every single day together might cause him to quickly grow tired of her. A heavy silence fills the air as she quietly contemplates her own deep lingering insecurities. She internally acknowledges that having these doubtful thoughts before marriage is just excessive gloomy pessimism. Fearing his eventual disappointment, she notes that pretending to be gentle would be worse than hatred. She regrets being entirely unable to change herself into a perfectly refined and innocently smiling lady. Accepting her own flaws, she quietly agrees that being a perfect doll might truly be impossible. Embracing her true nature, she openly admits being a very pessimistic person facing countless internal doubts. She desperately pleads with him to instantly end their relationship if he ever grows tired of her. Calling herself utterly cowardly, she silently laments pushing away someone offering such incredibly rare love. Despite recognizing her own immense foolishness, a powerful sense of hesitation violently grips her fragile heart. She feels completely crushed knowing she cannot return his pure romantic love without harboring dark doubts. Smiling warmly, he smoothly points out that her fear actually proves she wants eternal lasting love. Promising to love her forever, he joyfully interprets her anxious words as accepting his sincere feelings. He praises her wonderful efforts to remain beautiful while adoring her gentle shyness and meticulous attention. Calling her precious, he kindly insists that all her strictness proves how hard she truly tries. He tenderly confesses that her inability to hide certain emotions remains incredibly charming and highly precious. Expressing immense gratitude, he admires her deep sincerity and her generous forgiveness regarding his difficult past. Leaning in closely, he passionately declares that he absolutely loves every single part of her soul. Desiring to give her happiness, he gently asks what kind of future she truly wishes for. Caught completely off guard by his sudden question, she hesitates softly while trying to gather her thoughts. She quietly admits her simple desire to live peaceful, comfortable days without ever being cruelly abandoned. He confidently assures her that guaranteeing peaceful days alongside loved ones is an easily achievable dream. Taking her hands firmly, he powerfully proposes forming a binding magical contract of absolute eternal truth. He swears to surrender his very soul if he ever dares to break this sacred romantic oath. Shocked by the sudden development, someone loudly questions if he is truly making a contract of truth. Desperately pleading for him to wait, she anxiously asks Lord Vim what he exactly plans to vow. She nervously warns that demonic contracts are incredibly powerful and terribly unfair if favoring the dark entity. He happily notes her sweet worry while she intensely argues that wagering his precious soul is dangerous. Staring intently at the resolute mage, the curious demon asks exactly what serious pledge he will make. Speaking with absolute conviction, Vim Gisbert boldly formally offers his eternal love entirely to beautiful Charlotte Edelstein. He passionately swears to fully devote his entire living existence to always unconditionally protecting her endless happiness. Confirming there is absolutely no falsehood in his sincere words, the demon joyfully declares the contract sealed. The sinister entity ominously warns that breaking this sacred vow means that Dark Hand will strangle him. Vim stands completely motionless with a serious expression while accepting the incredibly dangerous, potentially fatal magical conditions. Finding delight in claiming his soul, the demon sighs before Vim smugly declares that will never happen. The shadowy creature chuckles softly while accepting the confident statement and casually agreeing to the finalized terms. Disappearing into the dark ether, the playful demon reminds them to summon it again whenever they wish. Charlotte stands trembling in profound shock over his reckless willingness to wager his precious soul for love. He softly assures Charlotte that she can finally stop worrying about his profound romantic love ever fading. Struck intensely by his breathtaking sincerity, she gasps softly while feeling a powerful surge of deep emotion. Realizing his wonderfully reckless methods prove his deeply sincere feelings, she firmly embraces the beautiful, heartwarming truth. Gathering all her lingering courage, she stammers gracefully and sweetly confesses possessing strong romantic feelings for him. Surprised and hopeful, he urgently asks if she is truly sincere instead of merely expressing basic gratitude. Blushing furiously, she denies any forced obligation while gently admitting she felt heavily drawn toward him endlessly. She shyly reveals that every single time he bravely confessed, her fragile heart would relentlessly pound wildly. Gazing warmly into his wide eyes, she earnestly explains that Lord Vim is simply far too charming. She passionately lists his sweet words, burning gaze, and incredibly gentle actions as her favorite beloved traits. Flushing a deep crimson, she honestly declares that his devastatingly attractive face alone is completely, utterly unfair. Praising him as the most devastatingly handsome man alive, she leaves the greatly flustered mage totally speechless. She highlights his pure heart and unyielding loyalty, playfully admitting his insanely lavish spending habits worry her. Forgiving his minor flaws entirely, she fondly remembers the wonderful magician saving her life so many times. Their eyes lock in a deeply profound, magical moment of pure romantic vulnerability and overwhelming emotional warmth. Overcome by intense emotion, she sweetly confesses how heavily his whispered words of beautiful love affect her. Taking a deep breath to steady her racing pulse, she prepares to fully bare her devoted soul. With tears sparkling in her gorgeous eyes, she finally utters the three incredibly powerful, deeply awaited words. Instantly overwhelmed by profound bliss, the overjoyed mage lunges forward to tightly embrace his beloved beautiful lady. She breathlessly begs him to ease his tremendous strength while he hastily apologizes for squeezing too hard. Smiling radiantly, he softly explains that overwhelming romantic happiness caused him to fiercely hug her completely unconsciously. A beautifully bright, incredibly genuine smile graces his handsome face as he cherishes this absolutely perfect moment. Wrapped tightly in each other's warm arms, the two happily bask in their newly established romantic bond. Holding her incredibly close, he softly whispers how truly and profoundly adorable he finds his gorgeous partner. Overflowing with endless passion, he excitedly asks if she will lovingly accept him, showering her with affection. Resting comfortably against his broad chest, she softly marvels that this deeply beautiful reality feels like dreaming. Standing together under the bright sky, they firmly step into a remarkably bright future filled with love. Arriving back at the majestic family estate, the brave companions slowly step through the towering front doors. Walking confidently down the long hallway, they prepare to finally share the important and long-awaited news. Approaching the grand seating area, they respectfully greet the seated parents while maintaining a highly serious demeanor. Addressing her parents respectfully, Charlotte asks for absolute permission to carefully provide her important personal report now. Her attentive father gently acknowledges that Charlotte already told them a significant part of what recently happened. Daniel explains that Alois completely believed a prison book and foolishly took Charlotte hostage to force magic. He reveals that Alois suffered severe shock upon suddenly realizing that time reversal magic is completely impossible. Charlotte gratefully adds that Lord Vim's incredible and powerful protective magic fortunately saved her during the confusion. Concluding the intense explanation, Daniel firmly states that the arrogant prince's malicious plan ultimately ended in failure. The parents agree the royal family faces deeper trouble after foolishly trying to minimize Charlotte's official pardon. Maintaining a highly serious expression, Daniel calmly gestures while preparing to explain another heavily concerning upcoming complication. He notes that the arrogant royals foolishly picked a dangerous fight with a highly powerful, untouchable magician. Listening intently to the shocking revelation, the concerned parents sit together in complete and absolute stunned silence. Breaking the silence, Daniel reveals that Alois was permanently stripped of his royal status because of this. Nodding slowly in absolute agreement, the father firmly declares that stripping his status was a deserved decision. Daniel explains he demanded their cousin become first secretary to strictly surveil the newly appointed crown prince. He elaborates that Alois faces strict life imprisonment in the 6th cell without any access to books. Confirming the harsh but natural punishment, Daniel admits he also placed a powerful restrictive curse upon him. Folding his arms confidently, he assures his highly relieved family that this will absolutely never happen again. Charlotte realizes her clever older brother deliberately omitted certain highly sensitive details from his extensive official report. She notices he completely avoided mentioning Vim actually using time magic or her retaining intense prison memories. She warmly understands that he was kindly being considerate of the heavy feelings she could never speak. Despite his wonderful kindness, she bravely decides she truly wants to tell her brother the whole truth. Her father sincerely thanks Lord Vim for saving Charlotte, while Vim humbly claims he merely acted properly. Addressing her parents and brother, Charlotte formally requests to earnestly consult them about a highly important matter. Standing nervously before her attentive family, she briefly hesitates while gathering the profound courage to speak clearly. Taking a deep breath, she formally announces her complete and joyous acceptance of Lord Vim's marriage proposal. She happily admits falling entirely captive to his incredibly sincere devotion after only 2 short, wonderful months. Hearing this massive revelation, her deeply stunned brother softly murmurs her name in complete and absolute disbelief. The observant father warmly notes that this perfectly explains the highly positive change she showed since returning. Smiling gently beside her husband, the supportive mother happily agrees to fully support Charlotte's incredibly important decision. The father turns toward Daniel and respectfully requests his formal opinion as the next heir of the family. Glaring sharply at the magician, Daniel sternly reminds Vim exactly how much he deeply cherishes his sister. Meeting his intense gaze, Vim confidently agrees while firmly declaring that he actively treasures her no less. Daniel warns that anyone can speak freely but threatens eternal unforgiveness if Vim ever makes Charlotte regret. He conditionally approves the union if Vim bravely prepares to devote his entire life as a loyal servant. Vim cheerfully dismisses the worry by revealing he already made a binding contract ensuring his death otherwise. He passionately declares his entire life exists solely for her while mentioning a highly shocking demon contract. Catching the incredibly alarming demon mention, Daniel suddenly freezes in utter confusion and loudly questions the statement. Charlotte nervously calls her brother's name while observing his completely panicked and intensely shocked facial expression directly. Laughing loudly, Daniel observes that making a dangerous deal with a demon is an absurdly extreme method. Confirming his mutual understanding, the man quietly agrees that they now finally comprehend each other completely. He sternly warns his companion to never even consider leaving Charlotte behind by dying too early. Confidently meeting his intense gaze, Vim firmly reassures him that he would obviously never do that. Daniel sincerely congratulates them on their engagement while warmly wishing both of them absolute lifelong happiness. Smiling with profound gratitude, the deeply moved couple silently appreciates his heartfelt and genuine family blessing. Several months later, a terrified captive desperately screams for someone to stay far away from him. Trembling in absolute terror, the frightened prisoner helplessly cowers within the dark confines of his cell. A harrowing scream of pure agony suddenly echoes loudly throughout the gloomy shadows of the cold prison. A mysterious shadowy figure maliciously remarks that today provided another incredibly delightful form of twisted entertainment. Standing calmly in his room, Vim firmly reminds Alpha that he absolutely did not summon him. Alpha nonchalantly explains he only wanted to occasionally report what was happening over in the prison. Vim strictly commands Alpha to make the prisoner suffer patiently without breaking his fragile mind too quickly. Noting the troublesome woman was sent to a convent, Vim feels satisfied she will avoid Charlotte. Alpha cheerfully promises to be careful while eagerly anticipating enjoying his miserable captive as a snack. Vim confidently declares that Alpha cannot devour him because he is currently overflowing with immense happiness. Dismissing the creature playfully, Vim explains he is extremely busy preparing to welcome his beloved bride. Meanwhile, an elegant horse-drawn carriage steadily clatters along the bustling stone streets of the vibrant city. The ornate carriage gently continues its peaceful journey while approaching the grand entrance of their destination. Stepping gracefully down from the carriage, Charlotte immediately takes in the breathtaking sight before her eyes. Standing closely beside her, Vim warmly presents the majestic estate as their beautiful new permanent home. Gazing upward in pure awe, Charlotte marvels at the truly wonderful and incredibly grand sprawling mansion. Vim happily points out that the very best part is how it beautifully overlooks the entire city. She quietly reflects on her monumental choice to permanently leave her homeland for the Chrome Heights kingdom. Feeling deeply relieved, Vim expresses gladness while she remembers how everyone accepted her new life wish. They share a tender look of mutual affection while standing perfectly together before their grand estate. Gently breaking the comfortable silence between them, Charlotte turns toward her devoted partner to speak softly. She sincerely thanks him for graciously allowing her to tell her brother about the time reversal magic. Nodding softly, Vim honestly admits he also believed revealing the absolute truth to Daniel was better. He wisely adds that continuing to hide such massive secrets imperfectly would have only hurt him. Daniel tearfully recalls how he previously failed 4 times to protect Charlotte while dragging friends along. Falling to his knees in deep remorse, Daniel begs his precious sister for her total absolute forgiveness. Charlotte gently comforts her brother by reminding him that she truly did her absolute best always. Smiling with sweet affection, she warmly admits she would be much happier receiving his proud praise. Utterly moved by her endless kindness, Daniel tearfully praises her for doing incredibly well through everything. Hugging her tightly, he passionately declares that Charlotte is the brave sister he remains proudest of. Looking at Vim, Daniel gratefully acknowledges that this beautiful peaceful future exists entirely because of him. Vim solemnly swears to protect her precious happiness forever despite having unintentionally hurt her before today. Daniel fiercely threatens to never forgive Vim if he makes her cry, proving his unchanging devotion. Suggesting a fun secret disguise date in the bustling city, Vim leaves Charlotte feeling incredibly excited. Charlotte eagerly asks Lord Vim to focus on magic while she confidently handles noble affairs and territory management. She warmly explains that fulfilling this important role and working hard for his sake truly makes her happy. Gazing affectionately at his beautiful partner, Vim warmly praises his incredibly diligent and hardworking beloved wife. While he eagerly plans daily rewards like cake, she laughingly asks how much he intends to spoil her. Looking deeply into her eyes, he softly questions if spoiling her is wrong since it brings him happiness. She gratefully acknowledges that he obtained a wonderful noble title and grand territory solely for her precious sake. Smiling with genuine warmth and unwavering devotion, he gently replies that seeing her happy remains his only desire. Blushing softly under his tender gaze, she playfully warns that being utterly spoiled will surely cause her difficulties. He chuckles quietly at her cute reaction, teasingly declaring that spoiling her heavily actually brings him greater joy. Drawing her closer into a warm embrace, he sincerely asks if he is fully meeting dear Charlotte's expectations. Hugging him tightly, she happily confirms that his constant, loving efforts for her sake bring immense romantic joy. Sensing her deep affection, the charming mage boldly leans closer and confidently asks for a sweet personal reward. Recalling his past playful banter about claiming her freely, the chaotic memory momentarily flusters her racing, anxious heart. Overcoming her initial shyness completely, she softly whispers her willing consent while heavily anticipating his next tender move. Closing her eyes with deep trust, she gently invites him to do exactly as he passionately pleases today. Thrilled by her sweet permission, he breathlessly warns that he will passionately interpret her inviting words however desired. Their bodies press together flawlessly as they share a deeply passionate, breathless embrace filled with intense romantic heat. Lost within the incredibly intimate moment, he softly gasps beautiful Charlotte's name like a quiet, tender romantic prayer. Wrapped tightly in each other's warm arms, they completely surrender to the wonderfully deep, undeniable bond between them.